Yeah! Let's go, Blues!
All aboard the hot train!
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex was a fantastic open for us today. Listen, man, the Blues train is back on the track.
Yeah,
so
it is.
To tell you, when they win 4 in a row, I'm in. I'm in. It doesn't take a whole lot for this team to reel me back in, and that is exactly where we are at. The St. Louis Blues have won 4 in a row. They're, 4 points back now?
4 points, baby.
Of Vegas.
4
in
points.
LA. Two teams that decided, you know what, all of our chips, let's push them to the middle. Meanwhile, the Blues are like, don't want to do that. Definitely don't want to do that. We saw our team lost a few games. We don't want to make any moves at the deadline. And so here we are. We are now in the last month or so of the season. And Alex, the Blues are playing good hockey again. Now, to be fair, they didn't play particularly well yesterday, but they pick up the 2 points, and that's all that matters. On Saturday, though, if you had flipped these games and Saturday's game was played on Sunday, man, we'd be talking about the Blues having played maybe one of their best, most inspired all-around performances of the entire season. Alex, I don't know if this team is very good. Frankly, I don't care. Because the entire Western Conference, outside of the top 3 in each division, not very good this year, it turns out, guys. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and dream a little bit. I don't care about the draft pick anymore, whatever. Whether it's 12th or 17th or 22nd, who cares? You're not picking in the top 10 at this point. You're fine. How you feeling about the Blues right now, Alex?
Oh, I'm feeling so good. I made that open, and I felt like the Stanley Cup was at the end of that train destination. You know, once that train stops, it's stopping at Stanley Cup Central, T-Bone.
Okay, let's relax.
No, I mean, look, it's exciting right now for this team because it's to the point where the draft pick isn't as important anymore, where we spend a lot of time talking about, is it better for this team to go after it? You've put yourself in a position where it's going to be tough to put yourself in a good spot to where you can draft a player that makes a difference. And so now you're in this in-between, and the only place that is beneficial for this team that's talking about a retool is making it to the playoffs. And the playoffs are within reach because of Vegas and LA and what they've done. And look, both teams I expect are going to be tough to play against down the stretch. They're going to pick up points, but the Blues are finding ways to put games together. And for the longest time this season, we've talked about the inconsistencies. We've talked about the roller coasters to where you feel good about it, but then it takes a dip and they'll win a game and it's like, yeah, they didn't deserve to win that game. And then they'll do it again and you're like, man, what's going on here? And then you drop 2 of the next 4. But now what you're seeing is the Boston Bruins game. They played outstanding. The Boston Bruins game felt like, okay, they're building something. Then you come home and you beat the LA Kings. Now you feel even better about it. The Minnesota Wild game, I got to watch that and listen to it on my way home. Grant was filling in for me. That felt as close to a perfect game as we have seen the Blues play all season. And even the Anaheim Ducks, that Anaheim Ducks one last night, BK, that was the one that I was thinking was the real test because they had a 3-game win streak earlier this season, laid the dud against the San Jose Sharks. Five-game win streak, and they laid the egg against the Columbus Blue Jackets.
That's the game that I was thinking of. It's why I said after Saturday's game, you tweeted at me and you're like, BK, you ready to get back on the train? And I was like, no, man. Let me see what happens tomorrow. Not because I'm anticipating that the Blues will lose, but because I've seen the Blues lose this game. Yeah. I've watched this before. I've seen this exact movie, and I knew what the ending was. And it's so incredibly disappointing when you get back on board and then they go out there against a team that is guaranteed at this point to pick in the top 5, and they just lay a complete egg. And then I saw that first period against Anaheim, and I was like, yep, this is why I didn't jump on board. Because I know how this team does it. They play well against the quality opponents. They play well against Boston, LA, Minnesota. And then you go up against Anaheim in a back-to-back. You've got the excuse ready to go. It's laid out in front of you, and you stink. You lay an egg. 3 power plays in the first period, 0 for 3, completely uninspired performance. But they figure it out.
That's the part for me that it was so important and why I felt like they passed that test, because in the past, you never figured it out. Columbus, San Jose, you just laid the egg and you're like, well, what are you going to do? Every team's tough in the NHL. No, that's crap. Every team is not tough in the NHL. They're all NHL players, but like when you watch the Anaheim Ducks or the Columbus Blue Jackets or the San Jose Sharks play, you're thinking, yeah, you should wipe the floor. So Anaheim came into that game with back-to-back shutouts. But they passed the test in the sense of they had to bide their time until they found their game. I don't know what this means. Frankly, they could play great down the stretch and miss the playoffs. But what you're seeing right now and in a 4-game stretch is a team that is bought in into a playoff run, and they've got the goaltending to allow their shortcomings in other areas to cover that up for them so that they can be a playoff team.
A few things that have changed. So when they were struggling mid-February to mid-March, that team that we saw that we were like, okay, yeah, you definitely cannot add to this by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, the right move might be trading off all of your assets, including Pavel Buchnevich. What went wrong in that stretch of time was your special teams. We've talked about it ad nauseum. The 5-on-5 play for this Blues team is not good, has not been good. You should not expect it to be good. That's just not where they win games. They have really good goaltending. That's been the case throughout all of the season, basically, other than like a weird 2-week stretch. But they have good goaltending, and their power play and penalty kill, when they have played well, has been good. But for a month, mid-February to mid-March, the power play was actually quite bad. 7 for 45 in their stretch where they went 4-8-1. That was 28th in the NHL in that stretch. But the 45 power play opportunities, Alex, second most in the league. So they were working to get the power plays, but when they got them, they were not converting the opportunities. Penalty kill was also not very good. Wasn't abysmal, but wasn't very good in that stretch of time as well. So then lately, what's gone different? 4-game stretch where you're 4-0. First on the PK, because when you get 100% conversion rate on the PK, you're going to be tied for first in that area.
Yeah, that's
what they've
usually
done. 7 for 7. What I like most about that, only 7 penalty kill opportunities. And in the last 4 games, 5 for 13 on the power play, including the 3 last night. That is the 4th most power play opportunities in the NHL over the last 4 games, tied for 3rd in terms of execution on the power play. You're winning on special teams again. So the way that this team wins, we've known it all along. We've said it for a while now. Be really great on special teams, get excellent goaltending, and now the thing that has changed maybe the most, this is the part that is new, that is different, that I don't know if it's sustainable or not. The third line's contributing.
Yeah.
You're getting good contributions from guys like Brandon Saad and Kevin Hayes, and Bolduc's even having some moments lately. You're getting some stuff lately from Kapanen. Like, those guys that had been just zeros for most of the season are finally starting to contribute. And if that continues, you don't need it for long, like 10 more games. You got something here. Enough to get into the playoffs, and then we'll see what happens with Benner and net. But for right now, it's fun to watch, man. They're playing inspired hockey.
It is, and we're getting a ton of texts talking about, you can't trust us because we're so back and forth. Look, I understand it, but the Blues have been so back and forth, which is why I think a lot of Blues fans have trust issues with the team right now. But at this point, when you're looking at it and when you're talking about what we were talking about 3 weeks ago of, you know what, maybe you just need to be bad and go try and get a 8th overall pick or something like that. So the Blues right now have put themselves in a position where you are 7 points away from the team that would be selecting 12th overall. You're talking 12 points away from being a team that's selecting 8th overall. That's going to be very difficult to do. And as we've talked about before, for a team that's nearly in a playoff spot, I don't know if you want the tanking mentality for a group of guys and then get the 10th overall pick. And when you've got the goaltending, when you've got the depth of scoring, which we've been begging for so long, and you might get some reinforcements. Jimmy Snuggerud could be with the team by the end of this month, the start of April. There's more secondary scoring.
A trade at the deadline, really.
I've heard it's better. I've heard it's better than making a trade. Hell, maybe Verona comes back.
No, we don't want that.
No, we don't need that one right now. But
that's the 4-3 call. They've got 4 of them. He's the 4th.
The one thing we were begging for this team was to get more offense. And you felt like if you get more offense and more secondary scoring, well, then you're going to be a better team because of your goaltending. Well, Schen's scoring goals right now. You've got Robert Thomas back in action. Kevin Hayes is scoring. Brandon Saad is scoring. It's better than to get stressed out and say, well, you guys are so inconsistent. Just sit back and enjoy the ride right now, because with 15, 16 games left, you're 4 points out of a playoff spot, and you need one team to stub their toe.
Listen, man, I don't think they're very good. But again, the further we get along, the more that they are still 4 points back of these other teams that I thought were good. I thought LA was going to be good. I thought the Vegas Golden Knights were going to be excellent. It just hasn't come together for them. So, you know what? Why not? Why not? Have a little bit of fun down the stretch. I didn't think we were going to be in this spot. I didn't expect them to be in position to actually possibly capitalize. Like, you got a game coming up this Saturday against Minnesota on the road that has real meaning, potentially, as long as you take care of business against Ottawa. You got a game coming up next Monday, a week from today, at home against the Vegas Golden Knights. Man, I might take Baby Luka to that game, because that one might matter. It might actually have, like, real meaning in the playoff standings. Like, serious implications for the playoffs.
If Baby Luca doesn't have a conductor's train hat on, I will be very disappointed with
I'll
you.
try to find one. I'll go on Amazon tonight. If they win tomorrow night against Colorado, I will be buying Baby Luca a conductor train hat.
That's a tough stipulation to put on. Come on, it's freaking Colorado,
It's fair,
man.
though. It's fair.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to have to blow the dust off my press pass. You know,
Yeah?
it's going to be like the books and the National Treasure.
He's trying to steal the Declaration of Independence over here.
Listen, I get it. We have absolutely, at least for me, I've been riding this roller coaster of
I have
emotions
too.
all year long. And for most of the season, I was so far out, you could not get me to buy in. But man, we're into the final month of the season now. We talked about this with, or we heard Doug Armstrong talk about it last week when he had his press conference availability. He's like, listen, this is what you play for. You play for there to be meaningful games in the month of March, so that way hopefully you can continue playing late into the month of April. And for the Blues, they've got a chance to do that, man. They put themselves in position based on their last 4 games, and that's all it took, 4 games, to be able to play meaningful games late into the month of March. And for me, I'm going to go ahead and buy in because what the hell else do we have to lose?
Yeah.
What else do we have to lose at this point?
And if it comes down to it and the Blues stump their toe once again, well, then it's right back to where we were in terms of this is the team. And if they don't and they miss the playoffs by a couple of points, as much as that will suck because you've ruined your playoff chances, it could be a good thing for that group of players in the terms of, look, if we don't play so inconsistent in the middle of the season, we're in the playoffs. That's something that's a growing piece for your roster that you'd want.
Also, we'll know exactly which games they lost it at. It was Columbus and Nashville. If they end up missing the playoffs by a couple of points, those are the 2 games that I'll point to. The one going straight into the break where you had Columbus at home, you were rested, like there were 0 excuses for that game, and they lose it 1-0, flat out did not show up that night. And then the other was a game that we knew mattered. We knew had huge meaning. You're playing against Nashville at home, coming off of that big win against Edmonton, and that's where the last choo-choo came from. And they lose it. And they got embarrassed in that game at home on their own ice. So those 2 games, that's what you'll point back to if they don't make the playoffs. But if they do, it'll be because of performances like what we saw against Boston on the road. That was the start of something hopefully meaningful. We'll see if they're able to capitalize tomorrow night. Blues versus the Avs. Pre-game coverage starts tomorrow right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Alex will have that for you right here on 101 ESPN. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll talk to our friend Katie Wu. She is live down in Jupiter where the Cardinals have had even more news over the weekend. We'll talk to her about all of that coming up at 11:30. David Back is going to join us coming up at noon because, Alex, the Blues have a new man that is willing to stand in front of the net. The last time they really had that like this was David Backus. We'll talk to him about what that job is like coming up at 12 o'clock. But next, all right, you guys had the weekend to think about the Ollie Marmol extension. I didn't get to talk to you about it on Friday. I want to hear your thoughts on it coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, with Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We got to tell you about our friends over at Green Envy. Alex, they've been taking care of my lawn for a couple of years now, and I'm already starting to see the results in a big way. Over the fall, they took care of it. They planted all of the seed, and now we're seeing it come up right now. Meanwhile, some of my neighbors, I'm looking over at their yard, judging them, to be totally honest with you, because they don't have the same experience. Right now is the time where you get to see the fruits of Green Envy's labor, and I say that because I don't want to be out there doing it, frankly. I've got a baby boy at home. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy to go out there and put together all of the fertilizer, the seed. I don't know the Missouri soil. They will take care of it for you at Green Envy.
And that Missouri soil is so important. If you think you can do it yourself, buy the product over the shelf and save yourself money, you're going to be dealing with a lot of stress because the soils that you're buying are the cheap, ineffective stuff. It doesn't formulate for Missouri soil, the weather conditions, the turf types. That's what Green Envy does. They're worrying and taking care about the spring weeds, the crabgrass, so that you don't have to. Their service professionals are licensed applicators by the Missouri Department of Agriculture, and they come out there, they leave you notes of what they did, and then they tell you what you need to do to maintain that green lawn. Give them a call today, 636-757-1600. That's Green Envy at 636-757-1600.
All right, I reacted live on Friday to the news that Ollie Marmol was extended by the Cardinals for the next 2 years. Alex and T-Bone were both out on Friday, so I want to get their thoughts. They've had multiple days to come to their conclusion, but first, let's hear from John Mozeliak. John Mozeliak was on MLB Network over the weekend during the Cardinals' breakout game. Here's what he had to say about why he wanted to extend Ollie Marmol right now.
Ollie, as a leader, I think he does an amazing job as a manager. We did know that, publicly, I think a lot of people were like, get rid of Mo and Ollie after last year. So we want to be a little careful on the timing of all that. But really, I did not want it to be a distraction this whole season with him being on his last year of his contract. And so as spring training was unfolding, I got with Mr. DeWitt, we talked through it, and ultimately we added 2 more years to us.
Not surprised. That's the way the Cardinals do business. That's the way Mo does business. He wanted to give Ollie Marmol kind of his confidence and ability to puff his chest out in a clubhouse that's ready to win.
I echo that.
There you go.
So that's the explanation by John Mozeliak on why the Cardinals gave him a 2-year contract extension. Ollie Marmol extended on Friday afternoon.
Can I guess how BK reacted since we weren't here, T-Bone? Yeah! Ollie! Yeah! Ollie! Woo! Ollie! Ollie! Ollie!
You captured it. Yeah, that was pretty much it. No,
Ollie's back.
My thoughts were, I'll sum it up quickly for you. I don't understand the timing. If you wanted to bring Ollie Marmol back, you could have done this in November. If you truly believed in your manager, just get it done at the beginning of the offseason. It's not hard to sell. I mean, nobody would have bought it, but it's not hard to sell. All you say is, hey, listen, we never thought that Ollie Marmol was the problem with the roster last year. We thought the roster was the problem last year, and that's why we didn't win. And we're planning to have a massive overhaul of that roster with Ollie Marmol as the manager, not just for this year, but for years to come. Boom, you sell it. That's in November. And now all offseason, you don't have any of the Yadier Molina buzz, the Albert Pujols buzz. You just set it aside. You don't have to worry about any of it. Instead, they had to worry about all of it because they were literally asked about it at winter warmup. And Mo said, yeah, those are reasonable questions to ask. Okay, what changed between then and now?
He became
I think
a better
the Cardinals
leader.
are scared. I think the first month of the season is daunting in terms of the schedule. I think we're overselling how daunting it is, but neither here nor there. And so they looked at it with the injuries that are at play, and they said to themselves, all right, people are going to once again be calling for Ollie Marmol's head. We want to get out in front of this. You could have done that in November, but let's go ahead and do that right now. Get it taken care of so that way people don't ask the question in mid-April, hey, when are you going to fire Ollie? Those questions are still coming if they lose, but that's why they get it done now. I think the timing is highly suspect. I think the actual decision itself, I liked it. You guys know, I think Ollie's a good manager. I don't think he was the problem last year. So that's where I came to my conclusion. Alex, what did you think?
My first thought when I saw it was, are you kidding me? Because not so much because of Ollie. Like, I think Ollie's a good manager. I think it doesn't make sense in what they said in the offseason at winter warm-up and acted like, oh, yeah, I understand people asking questions about Yadier Molina. And, yeah, Yadier Molina wants to be a manager. And, oh, yeah, we want him to be a part of our staff. And, well, we don't really know what's going to happen with the future of this team. And then now all of a sudden it's, oh, he's a great leader and we need him. This screamed. The moment I saw the news, it screamed, well, we need to take all of these noises away from the start of the season so that we can actually focus on winning baseball. So let's lock up Ollie Marmol so we don't need to worry about the could Yadier, because most thinking the first time we go on a losing streak, then all the Yadi noise comes up and then the team is in shambles. If you think this team is that fragile, then the signings of Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson and Matt Carpenter and Brandon Crawford were all for naught. Because if they're that fragile that you have to sign a manager that last 3 months ago you didn't believe in and now all of a sudden you do, it just screams trying to eliminate the noise. And now you're talking about if it does go bad, you're stuck with this. And maybe it's not on Ollie. Maybe it's on the roster. Maybe you need to change the roster. But do we really think John Mozeliak will change the roster if things go poorly in 2 months? Because I don't.
Yeah, I would not have done the contract extension. I would have played it out just because I don't know what Ollie Marmol is as a manager. You know, year one was great. I thought he pulled all the right strings. I thought he pushed all the right buttons. Year two, I can't say the same. And look, I don't put all of last year on Ollie Marmol. I really don't. I think a lot of it was the roster he had sucked. But there were still, even if the roster was bad, there were still some decisions that were baffling to me. The amount of playing time Mater got. Some of the bullpen decisions that he would make throughout the year were kind of baffling to me. So I would not have done this just because I really do not know if Ollie Marmol is a good manager. I will say this, though. I do think the one thing that he did have for him that we don't give him enough credit for, especially at the end of the season where you get all the reports that come out, like San Francisco was like, hey, our locker room really sucks. And they went, oh, hey, that means Gabe Kapler should be fired. You saw a lot of those. San Diego was like, hey, this is a nightmare behind the scenes. To Ollie's credit, that did not come out here in St. Louis.
Yep.
That was not reported. That was not, there was, the clubhouse actually supports Ollie Marmol. That is not a lie. That is not us lying through our teeth. The locker room supports Ollie Marmol, and because of that and the fact that he was able to keep them together as a group throughout a terrible season, he should deserve a lot of credit for that. Would I still give him a contract extension? No, I would have played this out, and that doesn't mean I would have fired him after the first month. I would have given him at least until the All-Star break, but I was shocked by it because you're right. The timing is odd. It almost felt like it was the classic check your to-do list, and then you forgot that you wrote something on the back and went, oh, crap, Ollie was supposed to get a contract extension
You mean
this
like
offseason.
Remind the media that Tommy Edman is going to have wrist surgery?
Like that one, where that one was forgotten.
I forgot about that.
Mo is on a torrid pace this offseason.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can watch us and chat with us over on YouTube as well, youtube.com/101ESPN. This one comes from the 636. Guys, they waited for two reasons, in my opinion. One, Mo said he was busy with roster construction. I want to react to that one first before I get to the second one. The reason why he was busy with roster construction is because it was so depleted, but also that's not a reason to not do this. They said, hey, Ollie had conversations with Mo and DeWitt on Thursday night. And by Friday morning, the contract was done. So it took them one night to figure out the parameters of what the contract was going to look like. They could have easily done this in the fall. Do you remember how quickly they were done with their offseason? It took like 5 days. Yeah. And they had all of their pitchers in, and it was over. Boom. Pop gun offseason once again. Yeah, they continued with some relievers, but that was it. They could have easily done this in the offseason if they wanted to. All right, 2. They think it was better from a PR perspective to do it now than it was to do it right after a 91-loss season. That one I think is semi-reasonable, but I think it's a miscalculation by the Cardinals side if they believe that to be true.
Yeah, it's not like people forgot about the 91 losses last season.
It didn't matter if you did this in November or now. It was going to be viewed as you just rewarded the manager that had the worst season by a Cardinals team in 30 years. There's no getting around that. That's what you did. And so if you honestly believe in this manager, just do it early. That shows fans, whether they like it or not, we really believe in this manager. Waiting to do it until now is just, it feels reactionary. All right, want to hear from Katie Wu, Cardinals insider for The Athletic. She's been talking to everybody down in Jupiter about this extension for Ollie Marmol. What is her conclusion on why it happened now? And what does she think about this roster heading into opening day, where I believe it is up to about a quarter of the players that we expected to be on the 26-man roster are not going to be on the 26-man roster due to injuries. We'll talk to Katie Wu next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my dentist, 100 West Dental. Think about the last time you went to the dentist, and if you have a memorable time there, or if you dread going to the dentist every 6 months, or maybe you don't go every 6 months, maybe you go every year. Regardless, if you don't look forward to going, then it's time to switch it up, because you need to get with a dentist that, one, provides you some really good patient experience in the sense of you're comfortable when you go there. It's not those weird dim lights that you're like, oh gosh, where am I right now? You sit in a comfortable chair. They've got Netflix for you. The hygienists are just incredible to be around. That's the environment you want when it comes to the dentist. But more than anything, it's also getting the preventative procedures. And what I mean by that is getting a dentist that is concerned for you and your mouth for the long run. They're always looking for early detection of any problems. I didn't have that in the past with my dentist that I went to regularly, and I lost 7 teeth. I got a tumor in my mouth that they missed, had to lose those teeth, had nerve damage on my lip, and a ton of medical bills, all because a dentist didn't do the preventative procedure. So get with the right dentist, and that's Dr. Pryor and his team at 100 West Dental. You can book online. You can even do online consultations with them. Just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you, 100westdental.com.
Tara Hendricks, New York Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues beat the Ducks last night 4-2, and they'll be back in action tomorrow night as they take on the Colorado Avalanche. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. Cardinals are off today in spring training. They'll be back in action with a split squad game tomorrow against Miami and the New York Mets. But over the weekend, they named that Miles Michaelis will get the start on opening day, March 28th at the LA Dodgers. The Sports Update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Katie Woo. She's the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. You can follow her on Twitter at KatieJWoo. And if you have been doing so over the last week, you have certainly seen plenty of news coming out of Cardinals camp. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. How you doing?
Gentlemen, I'm good. How are you? I'm thinking maybe we should start the segment off with like a collective deep breath. Just get everyone on the same page.
All right,
Yeah,
you
well,
ready?
Katie, no, I'm not doing it. No.
2,
No.
3.
No.
All right, Katie, let's talk about the obvious. On Friday, it was announced that Ollie Marmol gets a 2-year contract extension. What did you think about the timing of that extension?
Now is when you take a deep breath.
Yes, maybe we'll take a second one. I figured we'd start strong here. So that's a completely fair, valid question that I think the overwhelming majority of us in Cardinals land had. What was up with the timing of Ollie Marmol's 2-year extension as manager of the St. Louis Cardinals? Again, very fair, very valid, because the overwhelming majority of us did not see it coming. Over the last couple of days, I've had the opportunity to have several conversations with Ollie, John Mazalok, and several players in the clubhouse. And the consensus I came to, and I think what has been portrayed by multiple media outlets over the last 2 or 3 days, was the Cardinals weren't necessarily mulling over a managerial change. They had been very clear, even in 2023, throughout that whole disaster, that they believed in Ollie Marmol. And when I say the Cardinals, I'm saying John Mazalok, I'm saying Bill DeWitt Jr., and I'm saying the Cardinals clubhouse majority-wise. So I think when talking over the timeline of this decision with Mo the other day, he made it very clear that he approached Ollie with the obvious, you're coming into 2024 as the lame duck manager. We want to work something out, but as far as our priorities right now, we have to revamp this roster, and we will revisit it when we feel like our roster has been competitive and is finished. So they did the roster. We don't need to go through all those changes. We've done it many, many times. And they came into camp, and after about a month of camp, I think Mo and Bill DeWitt Jr. looked around and said, this is a group that we feel good about, and we have the manager that we want for the next several years. Let's lock him up now, because in case, and we can get into this, in case the team gets off to a bad start in April, Ollie's contract status is going to be a distraction. So we don't plan on making a change regardless. Let's just do it now. That was the organization's rationale for the timing of this extension.
And I think to a degree, all of that is pretty reasonable, Katie. Whether you agree or disagree with the contract, I think that's fair, and we can have quibbles about that. But I personally, you know how I feel about Ollie. I think that he's a good manager that was dealt a bad hand last year, and I think most managers in baseball would have struggled with that hand. That being said, what I am a bit confused about still, and I'm curious if you can enlighten us a little bit more on this, Katie, why not just get this done in November? Because if they believed in him the way that they say they do, and they gave him an extension, so clearly they believe in him, I understand that they were trying to do stuff as well on with the roster. This took one night to get handled. It didn't take a month for them to go back and forth with different negotiation tactics. They approached him on Thursday night, and by Friday morning, we all got a text that said, it is done. There is going to be a press conference later on this afternoon, and it was for his extension. So why not, in your opinion, Katie, get that done in November to just have this out of the way then?
Yeah, that's completely valid. And I think the biggest question, right, if you knew that Ollie Marmol was going to be your manager for the next 2, 3, 4 years, why not just get it done in December or in November? And again, we talked about what Mo has said about the timing, and I understand that. I truly do. The Cardinals roster was in pretty bad shape at the end of the 2023 season, so it makes sense that his priority was going out and finding the pitching that he feels the club needed. Now, I think, and this is my opinion, that part of the reason this extension happened in the middle of March instead of maybe in the middle of the season was because the Cardinals aren't rolling out their A roster to start the year. They're down their starting center fielder. Sonny Gray is progressing ahead of time, but he's not going to be ready for opening day. They're going to be without Lars Nootbaar most likely. Keenan Middleton is out for the foreseeable future. So they're already coming in with a bunch of holes. And I thought Ben Fredrickson in the Post-Dispatch wrote a pretty good column about this morning. The biggest problem in 2023 for the Cardinals was what? Questions about the starting rotation and pretty shoddy outfield defense. Now, the biggest questions for the Cardinals coming into 2024 are questions about the rotation and the outfield defense. So you put that and you combine it with the absolute brutal start to the season schedule-wise, and you can see things getting very dicey very quickly for the Cardinals. And I think the organization felt that if the Cardinals got off to a bad start, which is possible, it's possible for any team, but especially with those factors we just listed, the demand for Ollie's job would only intensify. It would only become more and more of a distraction. And that's when you start having your managers start feeling a lot of external pressure. Your players are feeling external pressure because they don't want their manager to lose their job. And it becomes a snowball effect that this team is trying to avoid. So I think that played into the timing of the decision. I'm not saying that's why Ollie Marmol got the extension. I think the Cardinals are pretty clear that they never planned to make a change in the first place. But I do think the Cardinals were looking at April and saw an opportunity for things to go sideways real quick and said, let's just eliminate the distraction right here and sign him down.
My only issue with that one, Katie, is, and I understand that rationale behind it, is you're also stating that, okay, well, we said that leadership was the problem. That's why we're locking up Ollie Marmol. We fixed the leadership in the sense we think it's going to be good. Now you've put yourself between a rock and a hard place if you're John Mozeliak, because if things start off poorly in the first month of the season, you can't look towards the manager and have, for lack of a better phrase, the easy way out of moving on and bringing somebody else in. And we've seen over time, John Mozeliak isn't somebody that's going to make a change to his roster. So you're stuck with the team if it starts off poorly.
You're spot on. And what the front office realized, or I don't know if they realized this, but what they've done in essence is shift the blame fully to themselves if things do not work out.
Yeah.
You don't have that easy way out, right? You can't shift the blame. Not that I think that they would anyway, but this is a business, and that tends to be how the business works. But by pledging your faith in Ollie Marmol, by pledging your faith in these veterans, and by continuously going on the record and saying, we think this roster, we've built it to compete. If it doesn't compete, the blame rests squarely on John Mozeliak and the front office. And that's essentially what they've opened themselves up to. Again, whether they realize it or not, that's pretty much what the story of April is going to be, is can this team go out? Really, again, they're not coming out with their A team. They're going to be down at least 2 to 3 significant guys, maybe even 4. Can they withhold a rigorous April and kind of, honestly, if I think the Cardinals play 500 ball in April, that's a win for this organization. And I'm not saying that the Cardinals are going out here and saying 500 ball is our new standard. I'm just saying, given the current situations of the team right now, on who they're losing player-wise, the teams are stacked up to play, and their overall strength of schedule, 500 ball in April puts them in a pretty good spot for the rest of the season.
Katie Wu is our guest for just another couple of minutes here on 101 ESPN. You can read her great work over at The Athletic, where she does have a full piece. It has a ton of quotes from players, from Ollie, from Mo, on why this extension was handed out. So it goes into greater detail over there as well, over on The Athletic. I think there's a nice little special going on as well if you want to join today. So go over to Katie's Twitter, at KatieJWu, for all of that info. All right, Katie, the other big story over the last week or so at Cardinals camp has been the continued ascent of Victor Scott, but it's changed a bit, because I think the last time that we saw him in a major league spring training game was last Wednesday. He had those breakout games that he was a part of. What's your sense right now on how the Cardinals are viewing their outfield, with Lars kind of working his way back? Officially now we know Edman not going to be a part of the opening day roster. What's your sense on the outfield right now?
So I think when we talked last week, we essentially discussed that this is Dylan Carlson's job to lose. And I think Dylan maybe took that personally, because he's played a really solid week of baseball. He's swinging the bat hard, making good contact. I think he's always been a really good hitter from the right side, and we're seeing better progress from the left side. I've never been one to question Dylan Carlson's defense. I think Victor Scott in spring breakout is kind of obviously why we haven't seen him play in more major league games, but I don't think that competition is as tight anymore. I think as long as, and I said this last week, as long as Dylan Carlson continues to hit, the Cardinals will have their opening day center fielder. Now, this is a competition that I think will go down to the wire, but there's no need to rush Victor Scott if you have a viable major league replacement. I don't want to say replacement. Dylan Carlson's been here for a while. Option, I should say, in center field. Now, if everybody was falling apart and the decision was between someone like Michael Ciani, who is more of a defensive replacement for late innings, and Victor Scott, then I would say, maybe the Cardinals have a tough decision to make. But if Dylan Carlson keeps hitting the way that we saw over the last week, then I think it's pretty clear that your starting outfield most likely is going to be Jordan Walker in right field, Dylan Carlson in center, and probably Brendan Donovan in left field. If you're going for defense, I know Donovan is more of an infielder than an outfielder, but if you're prioritizing defense, I don't see a situation where the Cardinals roll out Burleson and Walker in the same outfield. So that's where I see the outfield going. I do see Ciani making this roster, again, because he's that late defensive replacement. He plays a really good center field, guys, but I know that, Carlson and Ciani maybe don't have the same splash as a Victor Scott promotion. I'm not out on Victor Scott by any means. Again, I think he's a dynamic player. I just don't think with so much riding on this season, especially early, that it would set the Cardinals up for a lot of success to keep two rookies and Victor Scott and Mason Wynn in the two most important defensive positions and essentially say, okay, go win now. I think the safer bet for the Cardinals, maybe not the most exciting, but the safer bet is to start with Dylan Carlson in center field.
Katie, you had mentioned Middleton being injured and not starting the season with the team. What's the impact to this bullpen? Because I know that seems to be the most optimistic a lot of people have been area for the team.
Yeah, it was a tough blow. I was going over my roster projection with a couple people in the organization, and they said, pretty close, but there's one small thing that we're going to address in a couple minutes. And I don't really think Keenan Middleton was a small thing, and that comment was in jest, but I think it dramatically alters the Cardinals' bullpen. I was pretty bullish on the bullpen. I thought they were pretty underrated coming into the season. I still think that, but losing Middleton, that's pretty key. I mean, he was going to be right alongside Giovanni Gallegos as those high leverage setup men, setting up the most high leverage inning for Ryan Helsley. I thought Andrew Kittredge has had a great spring, and he'll still be in that role, but the Cardinals are now without a key late inning guy. And while there have been guys that have really shined in camp, like Riley O'Brien, Ryan Fernandez, both who I think will make this roster, I'm not sure how you can fill in Middleton with the same kind of allure and promise that he brought with his, throughout his 7-year career. So tough break for the Cardinals bullpen. It does create some opportunity for Andre Palante, who I thought looked really good in his outing yesterday. And, of course, the Cardinals can't really totally nail down their bullpen because they're still waiting to see what they're going to do about Sonny Gray, if they're going to IL him, if they're not. If they're going to need a spot starter, is that going to be Matthew Liberatore? Is Zach Thompson going to get the start if Sonny Gray isn't? So a lot of things are super fluid there. But I think that the main concern, if you take all those outlying things out, would be how are the Cardinals going to find a high leverage guy to pair with Gallegos? To me, that looks like Andrew Kittredge, and they're going to have to backfill from there. I think that's going to be tough. And I was pretty disappointed for Middleton because I was really excited to see him. He looks great so far.
Katie, appreciate the time as always. Great update from Cardinals camp. We look forward to talking with you again next week. Only about a week and a half away from the start of the Cardinals season, which will certainly be eventful. So we look forward to talking with you again next week. Enjoy yourself out there at Cardinals camp.
You got it, guys. Talk next week. Thanks.
Got it.
See you,
That's
Katie.
Katie Wu, one of the best in the business. Always appreciate her time. She joins us each and every Monday here on BK and Ferrario throughout the Cardinals season. Coming up in about 10 minutes, we're going to talk to David Backus, the former Blues captain. Wanted to reach out to him, Alex, because, man, when you think about the last time that the Blues had a net front presence like Jake Neighbours, it was David Backus. You have to go back pretty far to be able to see that kind of contributions at the front of the net. Want to talk to Backus about what that role is like, how long it took him to truly embrace it. We'll get to all of that with Backus coming up in about 10 minutes or so. Questions and answers coming up next. Alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley to tell you about our friends over at Circus Sports in Illinois. Alex, they were already the largest sports book in Las Vegas, and now they are available to you at your fingertips in the state of Illinois. So download their app today. It's the Circus Sports app in Illinois. Be sure to get that one. That's the one that you'll want in the state of Illinois. Alex, the tournament is officially here. It's just around the corner, and I am already starting to put my bets in for this upcoming week. I've got Duquesne winning head-to-head against BYU. It's a plus 350 on the money line, and that's one of the things that I love the most. When you bet on Circus Sports, you're getting those tight money line splits.
Well, I've already put together my East region parlay, and I got my West region parlay I'm going to be working on tomorrow. And I put those parlays together because they're not limiting people based off of their winnings. They're making sure you're bringing in the most money possible when you do those big bets like I typically do. So make sure you fire up that Circus Sports Illinois app for the tournament, and make sure you get ready for all of the sports betting that you want. And if you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Three 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. We'll have some questions for David Backus, the former Blues captain, coming up here in just a little bit. This one comes from a 314. Alex, do you think that Robert Thomas is starting to get that he needs to shoot the puck more, and we're seeing the results? Do you feel like Robert Thomas, it's clicked for him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He even stated that in the offseason and throughout preseason that him working with Adam Oates was massive for his development in terms of understanding the importance of being a dual threat so that teams aren't expecting. I thought the power play was a perfect example of that last night. How many times have we seen Robert Thomas skate in like he did and pass that puck? Teams expect that, but he's got a hell of a shot, and he's had 139 shots this season, which is a career high, and he's 68 games in. So, yeah, it's clicked.
From the 314, guys, we hear a lot about the schedule that the Cardinals play in the first month of the season, but I don't totally understand. Why is it seen as so daunting? I don't feel like it is that big of a deal. So it's the Dodgers. That's why people are saying it's such a big deal, because they start out in 4 games in LA against the Dodgers. It's not going to be easy. We all understand what the Dodgers are going to be. That being said, a lot of weird stuff circulating around Yamamoto right now. They came out today and said that, hey, we're going to have him follow our plans now for his pitching instead of him going with his own game plan. He has not had a lot of success in spring training. Been a weird start to it there, but I think he's going to be good. It'll be fine. So the Dodgers are the big one. After that, though, I actually agree with this texter. I think we have overstated the difficulty of the early portion of the schedule. It's not easy, but it's not like the hardest thing that we've ever seen. They play against San Diego. They feel kind of like a peer program for you, middling team in the National League. Miami, pretty good rotation, but a lot of it's hurt again right now. They play Philadelphia. All right, yeah, really good team. No doubt about it. But better in the playoffs than the regular season over the last couple of seasons. Arizona, I understand they played in the World Series last year. I think they're a peer program for you. You play against the A's. Okay. You play against Milwaukee. Okay. And then Arizona, the New York Mets, Detroit, the White Sox, Detroit. Like, what are we talking about here, guys? Is it hard? Sure. But it's really, we're talking about the Dodgers and Philly. Those are the games that people are really.
I think people look at Arizona as tough because they were just in the World Series, which I can understand.
84 games last year, though.
I think it's tough in the sense of the pitching that they're going to be seeing in the first month of the season because, like, Arizona's got a tough pitching matchup that you're going to have to go up against.
San
Diego now, and then, of course, you've got with the Phillies and the Dodgers. And the part that I'm skeptical about is what does the offense look like? So I can understand that side of it. But, yeah, overall, it's not like the offense you're going up against is as daunting other than the Dodgers and the Phillies.
Yeah, I think the part that, and it's why I'm not as concerned, because you're right, the pitching is a lot better that they're facing, is because this team is built on offense. You know, if this was like the Marlins.
So we're told.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did see that Carlson leads the Cardinals in home runs today when I read the paper. Like, oh my God, that's alarming. But it's not like they're built like the Marlins. You know, the Marlins are like, hey, if our pitching breaks, sayonara, we will not be in October. That's not how the Cardinals are built. So I feel fine about the way they're going. I think they should be favored in 4 of these series that they've got coming up. And then it's kind of a push and pull between those Arizona and Philly ones and San Diego. The only one that I don't think they're favored in is the Dodgers one. So, I don't feel like that is a daunting schedule. It's not like I'm looking at it going, oh, crap, they're going to lose at least 4 of these.
And if Sonny Gray's back for, like, let's say the Miami series, like he's back for the home opener, for example. Cool. Okay, so you missed him for a couple of series. Obviously, you'd rather have him on opening day against the Dodgers, but if you miss him for a week, so be it, man. We made a lot of the conversation whenever he first got hurt, I think justifiably so, because it felt like at the time, oh, this might be something more serious because we know how the Cardinals operate. Well, he's since then seemingly bounced back at every turn. All of the updates have been, relatively speaking, positive. Nootbaar, it feels like, might be ready to go a week or 2 after the start of the regular season. I don't think that the schedule is going to be a problem. If they are bad early on, it's because they're not a very good team. Not necessarily because the schedule was super daunting.
But then they locked up that manager for 3 more years.
Coming up next, David Backus. Always good to be able to catch up with him. Want to talk about what the value is early in a career of being able to get to the postseason. What does that do for a player to learn what the postseason is like? Also, what is it like to make your living in today's game as a power forward? That's what Jake Neighbours is doing. David Backus previously did it. We'll talk to him about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We're back on BK and Ferrario here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. Blues back in action tomorrow night when they take on the Colorado Avalanche, looking to make it 5 straight victories as they try and push for the playoffs. And now we head to our 101 ESPN guest line, and excited to welcome in one of my favorites, the former Blues captain, longtime St. Louis Blue, David Backes. David, it is always great to catch up with you, man. How are you and the family and the animals doing?
We're all well. Thanks for having me on. And, yeah, we're cruising along. My kids are in school after spring break here, thankfully, and getting a second to breathe and collect myself.
Well, in school, and I'm assuming in sports, too, so that means that you really don't collect yourself until the summertime, right?
That's true, but a couple hours during the day to knock off a few of the to-do lists and get a workout in certainly doesn't hurt my mental state. And then, you're right, after school, run them around to the activities, which is so fun to see them explore everything that's available to them.
You're my hero, David, because I have a 3-year-old little girl, a 2-year-old little girl, and I have one on the way that I already feel like I'm overwhelmed, so I'm not sure what's going to happen when I'm driving them around everywhere.
David. It's every year there's a new one coming out with him.
Yeah, that must be nice, but you're in the weeds, we call it. And,
yeah.
And I'm at the stage of 8 and 6 where they're in activities. They're not trying to kill themselves at all times, and you can take your eyes off them periodically. So it's amazing at the age that they're at for you, but it only gets better as they get older.
I just want them to pee and poop in the toilet, David. That's all I want. I just want them to go in the toilet. That seems to be the hardest part right now.
I've got the same hopes for myself someday, so we're all working on that.
Well, David, speaking of kids, man, we really wanted to get you on and talk about Jake Neighbours right now, and he's been playing like a pure power forward for this Blues team, which, I've said a couple of times on postgame, and my co-host has said a lot on the radio. It has not happened for the Blues since you played with the St. Louis Blues. So when the statement or the term power forward comes up, somebody who made a career, almost 1,000 games in the National Hockey League as a power forward, what goes into that role as an NHLer?
Well, I think it's being dominant physically and owning your space at all times around you, and that's where I start with the definition. I think it's changed a bit since I played. Certainly has with the rules and how they've been. The punishing the other team's defensemen and just crushing them every chance you get. Well, that's the physicality might still be there. It's not what it once was with the leniency I certainly had when I got into the league. But owning the front of the net, and there's less battles there now. So I think, it's an underutilized portion of the game by guys going there and just owning there. And there's a lot of goals to be had just hanging around the front of the net and less punishment than there used to be 10, 20 years ago. So I think it's phenomenal for the team. I think it gives them a leg up. It makes the other team's defensemen a little more leery at all times of what could be either coming after them when they have the puck or, the wide drive or just I'm going to bust through the middle, try to stop me. And you love that mentality. And I think, from a culture standpoint, it gives the team a lot to build off of as someone say, hey, this guy is a young kid and look at all the hard areas he's willing to go into. I don't care if you're, he's got an 8-year deal or you're a new kid. We can watch this and we can learn from it and look at the success that he's been able to have.
David, Jake Neighbours so far this year has 22 goals on the season. 17 of them have come right in front of the net or literally at the net area. So, basically all of his production is right there. And a lot of that is coming from the power play as well. When they stuck him on that unit, they finally started to take off in a meaningful way. And this kid's only 21 years old. I am curious, we don't seem to see young kids playing that way very often because it's a hard way to get rewarded. When you see somebody this young that is performing like that in front of the net, what does it speak to you?
It says that the kid's got a lot of courage. He was brought up the right way. He's probably had really good coaches or influences, through his youth and into, coming into the NHL. And I think it's one of those things that's cyclical. The more often you go to the net, the more goals you score, and the more goals you score, the more often you're going to go to the net. And at 21, when you learn that, he's got a long runway to use those skills. And, I learned it from a guy like Keith Tkachuk. And, if it gets passed on, you talked about the power play, too. To have a nut front presence it occupies one of the other team's defenders. Otherwise, he's all alone there. That opens up some seams. But B, I would say even Tampa and how their power plays evolved with all of their skill that's, maybe all going to be in the Hall of Fame, they still have a net front presence and a guy that's willing to get there and that scores a lot of goal, whether he's flexing out from the bumper occasionally or he's going to occupy the goalie's eyes. It's a necessary part of a successful power play, in my idea.
David, how much do you learn about yourself as a player in those first couple of years when you figure out that you can establish yourself in front of the net? Because you mentioned you have to own that space. And for a player like you, 6'3" when you came into the league, that's a big player that you look at and you say, he's a power forward. But Jake Neighbours is 6 foot. So when you're smaller than that and you know that you can establish that net front presence, how much do you learn about yourself?
That's a great point. I think it's a little bit of an experiment maybe early in your career when you get to the NHL, because you went from either playing junior hockey or college hockey against really your peers to now playing against men that are 10, 15 years older than you, 10, 15 years stronger, know a little bit of the nuances of, those battles in front. But as you get rewarded, you say, A, this is worth it, but B, I can hang here and I'm going to own it. And you know what? Until someone else tells me otherwise, this is my spot. And then it builds on itself. Like I said, you get that success and you say, I don't know why other guys aren't doing this, but I thought it was going to be difficult. It's really not. I just go stand there, maybe take a little abuse, but score 22 goals as a 21-year-old. If you're willing to take that abuse, it's certainly a payment that's getting rewarded.
Do you start to see that respect from other players in the league that kind of have a book out on you the more you play against them?
I would say yes. In my time, it was more of, is this guy going to shy away if I'm giving him shots, or is he going to get more mad and turn around and fight me? And I'm not going to deny that most of the fights that I got into, I don't know if I was looking to win them, but I was looking to show up, and I was looking to say, that's over the line, and I'm not going to stand for it. And I don't think either of us like to spend 5 minutes in the box, and you never know, I might get one in on you that hurts you. You might swing so hard that you throw your shoulder out, and I take you down to the ice. But that's what I think is more of the courage factor of, like, you're in there, you're taking a beating. Are you wincing and, going to the bench, holding your arm where you got a cross check? Or are you just ignoring it? And the guy's like, man, how much beating do I have to give this guy to get him to get out of here? Or, hey, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to fight you. And the guy's like, okay, I got to watch the level that I give to this guy, because at some point he's going to have enough and it's going to be on. And I don't know how many times I want to answer the bell to that. And I think that's, in today's NHL, it's different. It's more of the former and less of the latter, but both are still relevant, where stand there, take the abuse. It's not what it once was. And there's not much the defenders can do to you other than try to box you out and stop you from getting there. But once you get there, it's your space, and take the abuse, score your goal, and then stand over or smile at the guy because he didn't do anything to get you out of there.
David Backus is our guest here on 101 ESPN, former Blues captain. And David, we were talking about your team from that 08-09 season a little bit earlier. You guys go on that crazy run to finish the season, but through 60 games, you were right at 500. And the Blues this year are trying to do something similar, where for most of the season, a lot of the fan base didn't really believe in this roster. They didn't believe that it was going to come together, but they have a really good goalie, and they've got an opportunity now, and that's what led you guys on that run down the stretch, was Chris Mason having a tremendous finish to the season. What did that finish, what did that experience in the playoffs mean for you as a young player at that time?
Well, I think you got to rewind the tape a few years before that of being last place in the league, getting the first overall pick, having Eric Johnson as that pick, and, really having a full roster turnover. Old guys were, being sold off for parts and picks, and we were a young team. The old Scott Trade Center may have had 12, 13,000 fans in it. The, rink needed certainly upgrades, and the boards, you might not have recognized this as, part of the media, but the boards were dead. Like, Detroit's known for, at least Joe Louis was for, like, boards that if you pass it off the board, it springs off almost harder. It was so lively. Scott Trade was known for, if you slam a puck as hard as you can into it, it sticks to the wall, and it's tough to peel it off there. So our team, I would say, from that year that we picked Eric Johnson, we were, it was Lee Stepniak, Jay McClement, and myself was the kid line at that point, believe it or not. And, we were trying to establish some culture at that point. TJ Oshie and Patrick Berglund just getting in the league. But it was, get it up along that wall, forecheck the heck out of it, and just be relentless. And we were building culture back then to really form a foundation for, how we were going to be playing, what kind of blue-collar, environment we wanted to establish, whether you were supremely skilled or whether you were, an ankle skater that was just tough as nails and you got a spot in the lineup that night. So I think that was what was built. What we saw pay off that year was putting it a lot together when teams were, we played a hard-nosed style of hockey every game. And when teams were fighting it and trying to make the playoffs and getting a little cuter, especially after the trade deadlines, there's teams that acquire high-name players, but they actually get softer and less tailored towards playoff hockey than when they were before the trade deadline. And I think we saw opportunities like that to really, we had refined our game and fine-tuned it where we were playing playoff hockey those last 20, 22 games of the season, winning a lot of them. And, yes, we snuck in and got a playoff berth, which was, I don't know this, but if you were, in management or in ownership at that point, you're saying, heck, we're ahead of schedule here. We weren't supposed to make the playoffs for another 2 or 3 years as we built this thing back up from scratch. And we played the Vancouver Canucks, who was one heck of a team that year, and they swept us in 4 games. But you saw the reward for how we can play down the stretch and get into the playoffs, whether we were a little gassed playing that way all the way down the stretch or not, or we just ran into a very good Vancouver team, which I would say was even less their team and more Roberto Luongo that series. He was off his rocker with how good he was, but we got to see, we played hard regular season hockey at the end of the season, and we got in, but we just got swept. We got rewarded for the work we put in, but we've got further to go as far as when it gets to playoff time. There's another level we got to reach, and we got to figure out how we're going to get there. And that was a great lesson for us as a group.
And the interesting part with that, too, David, is the next 2 years you guys missed the playoffs, but then you went on a run where you made the playoffs for 5 consecutive years, and you talk about building that culture. And I think the one thing we hear so much from fans is, what if you got a better pick and you got a top 10 pick and, this team's in a retool and it's going to take a little bit longer. But I feel like as a player and as a team, it is more meaningful, even if you miss the playoffs by a couple of points, to have that chase down the stretch than worry about getting a top 10 pick.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you or the fans of saying, and I felt that a little bit as a player. Not that, hey, we should tank, we should lose games and get better picks, but there also seems like you get caught kind of, for lack of a better term in my small vocabulary, half pregnant of saying we want to be in the playoffs. But by being, in the hunt, you get a mid-first round pick, and it's not the top touted all-skill guy that's Connor Bedard that could be, a franchise, century player for anybody. And so that was my thought. And I think what might have changed a little bit, and Doug was, he dabbled maybe in my time there of like, let's acquire Ryan Miller at the deadline, or which I thought, hey, he's an all-star, all-of-fame type of goalie. It's a great pickup. But I think what changed more was we're going to go all in for Braden Shen. We're going to leverage some of the future for Ryan O'Reilly. And you go, Doug finally, or whether that's with ownership or what, he really said, we need to do something in the next 2 or 3 years, whether that's his contract expiring or however the timing works on that from a GM's perspective. But whether you get a high pick or not, there's also things you can do. And I think I'm talking a little bit in fragments here, but what Doug did those years is he did it in the summer. So you had the whole year to build with those guys and to assimilate them with the culture and how you were going to, run the team, rather than at the deadline and get them for 2 or 3 months, which was smart. But he also leveraged a little bit of the future, which might have been the last couple of years and not being as good of a team for the Blues. But you go all in, you give it a shot, and then you might have a couple of years where you're leaner because you leverage the future. You get a few higher picks, you stock up the cupboards again, and then you go all in again trying to win the thing. And I think that's more of the mentality or the thought process I had of maybe it's not top picks, but at some point you got to say, we're doing it. And you saw the Blackhawks do that year and year again when they were, beating us in the first round a couple of times. And then when we turned the tide on him, that might have been the signal for Doug of like, we're now the people to beat in the Central Division. But the Blackhawks did it. And they're always creative cap-wise or leveraging things. Tampa seems to always do it. Rangers seem to do it less successfully every year. But those teams that do that, you're like, it's go time now, and we believe it. And now we've got a few more pieces. They got to be the right pieces. But that's where I think, if fans are upset, I don't think it's tank. It's where are we in the cycle of 3 to 5 years to rebuild, and then 3 to 5 years to really have a shot at getting deep in the playoffs and winning a cup. And I guess I would pose the same thing to those fans of, are you more pleased with getting in the playoffs and coming up against a team that's at the peak of that curve and likely to lose in the first round, or would you rather say, all right, we're building something at the deadline, we sold. I know those last games that are, meaningless perhaps in the standings are tough to watch, but you're watching a little bit of the youth movement, and then you get some more picks, and then that next year you go, okay, now we're going to buy either at the deadline or the summer or at the draft, and we're really going to have a team that we're not saying if we just get in, that's great for this team. We're saying conference finals or Stanley Cup finals is really our expectation. And I think that's what fans really want, is to have a team that they believe can go deep and then watch it happen.
Yeah, fascinating. David, one more if you don't mind, and we really appreciate the time that you're giving us here, but you mentioned culture a lot there. How difficult is it as a player to build culture into a locker room?
It's extremely tough, and it's an extremely humbling experience from a leadership standpoint, and especially as a player. And the idea that you have to sacrifice your personal success to be an example for the team and what's expected of everyone. I would analogize it to planting a tree. Like, you plant a tree and you got to water it and you got to fertilize it and you got to make sure it's in the right sun or shade, whatever it needs at the moment, and then you get to watch it grow. But at any time, someone could come along and cut that tree down and totally undo all of the work that was done previously. And I'm not saying that's what's been done, but I'm saying is that there's a lot that goes into building the culture and maintaining the culture and everything, all the pieces that make that happen. And with little effort or lack of attention to that, it can be destroyed and start from scratch again and need, a restart in very short order. I love Braden Shen as a player. I don't know what he's like as a captain. I think he's one of the good hard-nosed players, undersized maybe for even all that he accomplishes in the game. But I would say he's got headwinds in younger players that have long-term contracts that maybe brings entitlement. And again, I'm not inside the room, and I'm not speaking from any knowledge whatsoever. I'm saying there's more difficulty to that than, I would say our biggest challenge was getting a guy like Vladdy Tarasenko on the page. But we also had tools and support from coaching staff and management. I know that, hey, Vladdy's got to be a part of this. And when Vladdy's a part of this and on the page and, willing to work hard on both directions of the ice and engaged every single night, he's phenomenal and a game changer, and we're way better than when he's not. So if Vladdy's going through the motions, we get in his face and, maybe push him around a little bit and say, hey, what's going on is unacceptable. And, character to Vladdy, he responded in a way that he's like, pissed at the time, but you have to come to Jesus after that. He's like, you know what, you're right, and I'm going to be better. And you go, man, we just got him now fully on the page and we're ready to rock, firing on all cylinders. It's less part of the game, I would say, now, but those tools are still there, and you hope that guys can continue what was, started in those years that we talked about earlier, continued into, what Petro and Steiner and guys did after I was gone, and then, Ryan O'Reilly and Braden Shen lately. I think the foundation's still there. It's just getting everybody on the page and cluing, especially younger guys that might feel a little entitlement into, while your skill is valuable, your skill kicks in after you've got these other pieces to your game dialed in. And when that happens, we're way better and you're more productive and everyone's happy.
David, always great breakdown. Hopefully we didn't cut too much time into your to-do list stuff, but thank you for taking some time and hopping on with us. We truly appreciate it. All the best to you and the family and to Athletes for Animals.
Thanks for having me. All the best to you, and happy springtime to everyone as the trees are budding and the allergies are kicking in.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful time of year here.
Absolutely. David, we always love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
There you go. David Backus, always appreciate him hopping on with us. I know we went long there, but when you get an opportunity to talk to somebody who had his toes in everything in terms of a rebuild, a team that was trying to compete to make the playoffs, a captain that took over a team that had sustained playoff runs and championship aspirations, and then a player from the outside, I don't think anybody can paint a better picture of what the Blues are going through right now than what David Backus just did.
I thought his analogy with the culture of a tree was interesting. First of all, the only thing I could think of immediately was Nick Sirianni talking about planting a flower. And it's like, a tree works a little better in
Backus
this
did it
analogy.
so better.
It's like, okay, so he went with the flower, which feels a little more fragile.
Come
and
on,
it makes
Nick.
sense given what happened in Philly last year, but we'll set that aside for a second. The tree analogy is perfect because he's right. Like, it takes time, right? And then it takes one experience for somebody to come in and with whatever the tool is that they're using to just tear it all down. And I think the Blues lost their way a little bit. I think they have admitted openly, hey, we lost our way. And it took a little while to get things back on the tracks. Alex, we can say whatever we want to about this year's team. I don't think they're overly skilled. I don't think they're overly talented. And that's no shot against anybody. It's just the truth of the matter, right? I do think the culture seems to be at least heading in the right direction now, though. Like, you're starting to see more often than not, they're playing hard. I think sometimes we fall into this, oh, they didn't try hard tonight. No, they just didn't win. They didn't play well. And this team is not overly talented. And so when they don't play well, it looks like they're not trying hard. Sometimes they just don't play all that well, guys. And that's just the truth of the matter. We don't want to admit that because that means our team's not very good. But it's true. Like, sometimes they're just not good. So I do think they're getting back on track in that regard. And I think what he said about Jake Neighbours is totally true. And I think Oscar Sundqvist we can put into this category as well. Having those guys play the way that they do is a lot of what the culture is for the St. Louis Blues. I think a lot of the Blues culture has been tied into a few guys that are willing to go to the gritty areas over the years. David Backus being chief among them. And right now, you have a couple of guys that are finally, after like 3 years of really not having any of it, finally willing to go back to the front of the net.
Yeah, and I mean, Joey made a comp to Jake Neighbours' play last night that I'm actually ashamed of myself that I didn't think of, and he said Tomas Holmstrom from the Detroit Red Wings. I don't know if you remember this guy, BK, but he was a destroyer of hope for Blues fans because every time he played, this was the guy that parked himself in front of Chris Pronger and he took cross checks to the back of the head, but he scored 30 goals on a consistent basis. And he was 6 foot, 198 pounds.
Damn.
Jake Neighbours is 6 foot, 202 pounds. And that's what I mentioned with David. It's like you could see guys who are 6'3" and 230 pounds and say, yeah, he's a power forward. But you have to establish your own space on the ice. And look at how these guys have been scoring goals. Jordan Kyrou against Minnesota, standing in front of the net. Kevin Hayes, last night, standing in front of the net. Alexei Toropchenko talked about how he's been working on his tip-in abilities, standing in front of the net. You hope that a culture that David Backus just said that he established with Lee Stempniak and Jay McClement can start to circulate into a Blues locker room, that Jake Neighbours is doing this and he just scored 21 goals. goals. If I want to be a 30-goal scorer, a 40-goal scorer, it's time to start taking this side of the game seriously.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. We totally screwed our clock up for the first time in show history. That is not my fault. Coming up next, the NCAA Tournament Regional Breakdown. We got to get into the East region because T-Bone wants to talk about his Illini and whether or not they can actually go on a run this year. Hey, hell of a performance in the Big Ten tournament. Can they carry it over to the actual tournament? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Tara Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues beat the Ducks last night 4-2, and they'll be back in action tomorrow night as they host the LA Kings. Well, pregame coverage, they host the Colorado Avalanche. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Update driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Oh, you know that time of the year. It is the best music you could possibly hear. It is time to break down our regions
All my
within the
money going out of my
NCAA
bank
tournament.
account.
That's right. We're going over to the Circus Sports app and
it's
putting in our money line
already
bets
built up
for the upcoming weekend. The way we do this here on BK and Ferrario, we will break down each region one per day as we get closer and closer to the tournament, which will start on Thursday. By the way, the bracket is set, which means that you can get in to play this year's Bracket Madness Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. Free to enter. This year's top score, taking home a $250 Amazon gift card and a 101 ESPN prize pack. It's all available to you over at 101ESPN.com. And this year it is brought to you by Bud Light and Twin Peaks. All right, Alex, I'm going to be totally honest with everybody. This is my candid, true answer. I have watched less college basketball this year than I have in the last 7 years, probably.
Same.
And I don't know if that's good or bad for me going into the tournament.
Terrible for me.
Can go either direction, honestly. But I have done my research, and I have landed on certain picks going into the NCAA tournament. Let's get into the East Regional, which is T-Bone's region, because his Illini come in as your 3 seed in this region after winning the Big Ten tournament. And they got a really nice draw for the first 2 rounds. I think their draw after that, though, is excruciatingly difficult. Iowa State is your 2 seed in your side of the bracket. They also, on the top of the bracket this year, have UConn, who might be the best team in the tournament, and Auburn, who I believe to be the most misseeded team in the bracket. As a 4 seed, they might be a top 5 team in the country. So, let's start with this. The first round game you're most intrigued to see is what, Alex?
Probably Auburn-Yale, because I know we're going to get to your upset. I think Yale beats Auburn. I actually have Yale beating Auburn in that one. Yeah. That would, I don't know if it's entertaining. See, here's the thing. Like, when you see UConn play, when you watch Iowa State play, when you see Illinois play, I'm expecting those teams to dominate up against them because they should be, 1, the top 3 teams, and 2, when you look at how their offenses and defense for Iowa State has performed, I can understand it. But I always look, and the most exciting ones for me are those upsets, and I do think Yale beats Auburn in that one, so that's the one for me.
I think the one for me is going to be that 8-9 FAU Northwestern. I really like this Northwestern squad, but I really like FAU because they've got experience. It's a lot of the same guys that came back from last year's team. They've got their big man. They've got an elite guard that can play for them. That's the one that I know it's kind of like, well, duh, it's an 8-9. But sometimes you get a little bit of duds from that middle portion of the bracket. I think that's the one that I'm most excited about because I think that FAU team can push UConn. I don't think they can beat them, but I think they can push them.
So mine's going to be a team that we saw last year get real deep into the NCAA tournament, and that's San Diego State. San Diego State is taking on UAB, who's going to be everybody's darling going into this tournament. They're an interesting squad. They are going to score a whole lot of points. They are going to give up a whole lot of points, which is basically the opposite of what San Diego State typically does. So that's the game that I'm most intrigued to see because it's a tale of 2 very different teams. They play different stylistically, and those are the games that I enjoy watching the most. When you've got one team that's run and gun and put up a lot of points and another team that's trying to dictate the tempo, playing real slow, we're just going to have a slugfest here. Those are the styles make fights type of a game. I like the 2 different styles in that one. I do think San Diego State comes away with a victory. I think it's going to be real close. The classic 5-12 matchup, the one that I'm going to be paying attention to. The first round upset. Alex, you mentioned yours. Why do you like it?
I love James Jones seems to always get the best out of his team. I remember that last season. In fact, I think I had Yale losing in the first round last year, and they won, which blew brackets up for left and right for me. But I also look at them and I see 5 different guys that are averaging double figures right now. And look, I understand Auburn. Somebody already texted in and said Auburn's got a top 10 offense and top 10 defense.
The only team in the country that can say that, by the way.
I get it. And they ran the table in the SEC tournament. But as we've seen in these March Madness brackets, it really doesn't matter what you did in the regular season or in the conference championship games. It comes down to the first round. And when you got a good head coach like I think the Yale Bulldogs do. Bulldogs? Yeah, Bulldogs, right? I don't know team names.
Poor man.
No idea.
Probably. Oh, we'll say yes.
I just know they're in the
I
Ivy
love
League.
that you're a big James Jones guy.
I am, though.
You saw him play in the NCAA tournament. You're like, that's my squad.
Well, I was weird like that too. Michigan last year with their football coach. What's his name? I loved that guy in the first game I watched, and then Michigan not Michigan, Notre Dame. I loved the Notre Dame coach last year in football, and I was like, oh, this guy.
There you go.
This guy's good. And team
I'm
sucked.
sure it's going to go really well for you this time around, though, man.
I backed one team that got bounced in the first round and had them go to the Final Four. So
T-Bone, who's your squad this year to pick up an upset in the East region?
So I don't even know how to pronounce the school. Starts with a D. That's all I know. Duquesne, but they play defense. Dang
Why'd
it!
you take mine?
I love that because they play defense, and that's why I love them. When you can play shutdown defense like Duquesne can, I think they can beat BYU. I have another one but if I would have known if I knew you're going Duquesne, I would have given this one out as well. I like UAB. They got a great offense. I could totally see where they end up taking down San Diego State.
So here's the thing. With Duquesne against BYU, mine is more about BYU stylistically than it is about what Duquesne does well. BYU, almost half of their points are coming from the three ball this year, which when it works, goes really well. When it doesn't, though, you leave yourself open to the possibility of a serious upset, especially in the NCAA tournament. BYU was really good for the vast majority of this season. I just don't know that I buy it going into this tournament. They have not been to the NCAA tournament since 2021. They only played in the first round that year. This is a team that is extremely inexperienced when it comes to this kind of a game. I think Duquesne has a really good shot to be able to pull off the upset here. So I'm taking Duquesne. I think they went straight up against BYU. I don't know that they're a better team, but stylistically, I think this is the type of matchup where an upset could happen pretty easily.
I'm going to call my shot here, too. Keep an eye on them jumping around Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. They may be a 15.
Get the hell out of here.
But Mizzou knows best that just because they're a 15 doesn't mean they're not a bad team. I can see where they beat Iowa State. That team's great defensively. Iowa State sometimes doesn't have the offense that they need. Keep an eye on the
Best defense in
Jackrabbits.
the country. They're going up against South Dakota State. I think they're going to be fine.
keep an eye out for Morehead State.
No, they're going to lose that game.
All right. If you were looking for a sleeper in this region, I think it's tough to find, honestly, because the top four teams are so good that all of them, I think, are going to have a pretty decent chance to move on. But if you were looking for a sleeper, who is it for you, Alex?
Mine's Drake. And like you said, I think it's a tough run because your next round, as long as South Dakota, the jumping Jackrabbits don't have their way, as T-Bone mentioned, that's a tough matchup for the second round. But you're 28-6 with top 40 offense, and they have a superstar on their team in Tucker DeVries. So that would be the team for me. Like you said, I don't really like Cinderella teams in this bracket very much, but that would be the team I'd pick.
Yeah, it's tough to find one here in this region, but I'm going to say it. I would say keep an eye on FAU. They've got experience. I saw them hang tough with the Illini early on in the season. The problem for them is they have their struggles defensively. But, man, they've got experience. If they get hot down the stretch, maybe they can go on a run. Maybe they can pull off an upset on UConn. Maybe they can get past Auburn. They're the team that I just really like as a team that is you're sleeping on them because they have a ton of experience and they're just an 8.
So I'm going to go with Washington State. I do think it's coming from that area that you're talking about, Alex, with Drake, Washington State, one of those two teams. I think either of them could beat Iowa State in the second round because Iowa State, as T-Bone mentioned, is very defensive-oriented, and there will be nights where they just don't have the offense, and if the other team gets hot, especially from three, you got a real chance to be able to beat them. And then you go against Illinois, potentially, and Illinois doesn't play any defense. Whoa. So I think it's got to come from that bottom side of the bracket, and I think the two teams that are capable of it are Washington State or Drake. So those would be the two that I would be honing in on. I don't think it's particularly likely. This is not my region that I'm going to be going with for an upset in terms of like making it out. But I'll go ahead and take Washington State as my team that has the potential to be able to do that. All right, who's the team you're most confused by? You're going into the tournament and you're like, they could get beat in the first round, or they could make a run all the way to the Final Four out of this region. Who's the team that you were most confused by heading in?
Mine's FAU. And it's that 8-9 that T-Bone talked about. Like, I always feel like FAU's the team that I always look at and I say, I can't be that good. And then they go on a run and make it all the way to the Sweet 16. And I'm thinking, where the hell did this team come from? And with an 8-9 matchup, I mean, who knows with this one? You get out of that. Obviously, you have to face off against UConn. FAU's the team that's confusing.
I think the one for me, and that's why I put them a little bit on upset watch in the first round, is Iowa State. You're a 2 seed. They're fantastic defensively, and I love that. But, man, their offense scares the crap out of me to where maybe they don't lose to the 15, but I have a tough time seeing them getting past potentially a Washington State, past an Illinois, past whoever else they may see at the top half of the bracket. They confuse me because they're great defensively, but I've seen teams that are good defensively struggle on offense and get knocked out in March.
It's your Illini. I don't know what to do with them.
No, we're all going to say it together, but
He did it.
They have one of the best teams in the one of the best players in the country. Terrence Shannon Jr. just put on an absolute show in the Big Ten tournament. Went for, I think, at least 30 in all 3 of their final 3 games. But they were down by 10 in all 3 of those games
They're like
at
comebacks.
halftime.
yeah.
They do not play defense. Like, they just opt out of that side of the ball.
Way to go, Brad.
But, man, is this offense good. Like, it is an excellent offensive basketball team. It kind of reminds me of last year's Mizzou squad. It does. They cannot get stops. But in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, they seemed to really find a way in the second half to adjust to whatever it was that the problem was in the first half. Screen and roll was the problem for them yesterday. They figured it out in the second half against Wisconsin, and that's a good Wisconsin team. So, I don't know, man. Illinois could not easily, they could definitely make it to the Final Four. They absolutely could. And they could also lose in the first or second round, and I don't think it should shock anybody this year because they are so gifted offensively, but that defense is so limited.
Watch out for them soaring Morehead State Eagles, right, T-Bone?
All right, final thing.
Actually worry me.
What do you got as your Elite Eight coming out of this region? What do you have in this one?
Oh, geez, Elite Eight. Okay.
So the final 2, the team that you have
final
meeting
2. I'm sorry,
in the
yeah.
Elite Eight.
I have UConn versus Illinois. I think Illinois' offense gets them there, even if their defense stinks. Iowa State, if they match up with them to get to that Elite Eight, it's not going to be easy. But for me, I think UConn's going to be easily accessible to that Elite Eight headed towards the Final Four.
I got the Illini there as well.
What? Of course you do.
And I got them taking on Auburn. I think Auburn, you mentioned it, I feel like they're an underrated team. They're the only team that's top 10 in offense and defense efficiency. I think they end up getting past UConn, and I think they end up meeting the Illini. And then the Illini, woo, we going to be dancing Final Four bound, baby.
T-Bone's bracket's already shredded. I don't feel good about this one. I don't feel good about whatever it is that you have coming out of the bottom portion of this bracket. I think is going to be tough. Like, good luck. I've got Illinois making it to the Sweet 16 and then losing to Iowa State, who gets to the Elite Eight against Auburn. And I've got Auburn coming out of this region. Top 10 offense, top 10 defense in terms of efficiency, that is typically the formula to winning an NCAA tournament. And that's why I have Auburn this year winning the tournament. That's my team. I'm backing them. They have one of the best players in the country on that team. They are playing their best basketball right now. I think Auburn's going to win the title, and I've got them coming out of the East region. Tomorrow, we will continue with our breakdown of the West region. That's the one that has North Carolina as the 1 seed, Arizona, Baylor, and Alabama as the 2 through 4. We'll break that down for you tomorrow here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll continue our countdown to the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season. We will do so with a pitcher who is even more important today than he was, I don't know, about a week ago or so. I also want to have one other thing, though, to say here before we get out of the NCAA tournament. T-Bone, I do want to talk about your lineup. Because
why, man?
You're back to being all in on them.
They stink.
Do you trust them?
No.
Because
not at all. I think they could lose in the first round.
If only people could have seen his face when he said no.
They looked amazing in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, they did. Well, if you watch the offensive highlights.
Especially second half.
Yeah.
You don't trust this team at all, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Their defense is going to end up what kills them. And the reason I think they win in the first round, but the reason I am a little worried is Morehead State can shoot the 3 ball. And I can't remember who it was that they lost to in the Big Ten. Somebody in the Big Ten early this season just killed them with 3-point shoot. Purdue, that's who it was. Purdue killed them from the outside in the second half last time they saw them. Now, I'm not saying Morehead State's Purdue, of course.
Yeah, they lost to Purdue, in fact, by 40.
Yeah, well, this is an easy dub then. Easy dub. No,
Alabama beat them by 35. Purdue beat them, by 30. Penn State beat them by 20. Indiana beat them by 1. So that's your closest Power 5 team against them.
The part that scares me is what happens when they run into a legitimate offense. Like I've got them, the way my bracket works out, playing Duquesne in the second round. Yep. I'm not worried about them offensively, so I've got the Illinois winning. Again, I'm going against Iowa State, and I think because Iowa State's not a great offensive team, I think they can get past them. It's when they get to that part, whether you have Auburn, UConn, whoever you have coming out of the top, that's where I'm worried, and that's why, I've said Elite Eight should be about where they get to this season, and I think that's probably where they am, but I'm a believer, and I got them going to the Final Four.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see what it looks like. This is a really tough draw if you want Illinois to get super deep. I think it's a pretty good draw, though, if you want them to get to the Sweet 16. Like, if this was a year where you're just like, hey, Brad, can you please get out of the second round? Can we just get to the Sweet 16?
Brad.
Please get to the second weekend of the tournament. I think you got a pretty good draw here. If you're looking for them to really go on a run and capitalize on Terrence Shannon and this group of players that has started to work out around him, it's a tough one, man. It's a really tough one because Iowa State, for all of their faults offensively, is literally the best defense in the country. The best defense in the country so far this season. And they did so despite playing in an incredible basketball conference this year in the Big 12. So that is not going to be an easy draw. I'm with you, T-Bone. I typically lean more towards offense than defense. But Illinois is so flawed defensively that I think if you were ranking the best units in that game, it would go Iowa State defense, Illinois offense, Iowa State offense, and then Illinois defense in that game.
Yeah, and that would be my concern. But I will say this, because they are deep, I like the fact that they should be able to kind of mask some of their defensive efficiencies. The fact that they were able to win the Big Ten title without a defense, and by the way, finish, I think, it was second in the regular season, makes me feel confident that the high-flying Illini can get through this region.
Watch out for those Eagles.
Alex, you know some good happy talk for Mizzou basketball?
No.
You remember the Porter brothers that came to Mizzou together?
Oh, they opting out of the NBA and coming back to college?
There's a third one.
Oh, well. Both didn't really go well for Mizzou. So
Hold on. Did this guy just bring up Mizzou back? Man, they didn't make the 4 tournaments that go on at this time of the year.
They didn't win a basketball game.
They didn't even make the NIT one?
They
CBI or whatever it's called.
Javon Porter is 6'11", 220 pounds.
That's a big boy.
He averaged 16 and 6 this year for Pepperdine. He is considered to be arguably the #1 player in the portal so far. Sounds like he might be heading to Mizzou.
Man, if there's anything I know about Dennis Gates and recruiting, that kid can't play in the SEC.
Does that mean his dad is going to have another job as an assistant coach for Mizzou?
Whatever it takes, man. Whatever it takes. All right, coming up next, we're diving into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and it is time for you to unlock your inner champion today. Victory Men's Health is there to help you out. Whether you want help with weight loss, testosterone, erectile dysfunction, they have what you need to get yourself going once again over at Victory Men's Health. The easiest way to do so, check out all of their information online at victorymenshealth.com, or you can check out one of their 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, one in O'Fallon, Illinois, another in O'Fallon, Missouri, and then they've got 2 more. Town and Country, and their newest location opened up just last month in Sunset Hills, Missouri. The exact details are over at victorymenshealth.com for you. Maybe you're somebody that is waking up in the morning, you don't have the same amount of energy, you don't feel the same confidence that you once did. Well, Victory Men's Health can help you out with that. They're going to take that lab draw kit to find out, okay, is it low testosterone that could be your issue? That includes some of the symptoms: depressed mood, decrease in memory, irregular sleep patterns. Maybe you've got changes in your mood as well. All of those potential symptoms of low testosterone. Ask them about it over at Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. Alex, have you ever heard of some of the symbols for swinging?
What?
So I know a pineapple is for
That's the one
swinging.
that I knew.
Because I told my wife I wanted to get a pineapple swimsuit because I saw somebody wear them, and
Sure.
she's like, "Yeah, you don't want to do that." I'm like, "Why?"
So I've seen a pineapple in front of a house before, and it signifies
You went
things.
and knocked on the door.
Of course. No, so yesterday
Brandon.
I was out on a run, and I was listening to this podcast.
Pisces.
It's a fantasy football podcast, and naturally that means they were talking about swinging. Did you guys know that in the 60s, the Yankees had 2 players that switched families? Did you know about
What?
this? Have you heard about this story?
Who was on the Yankees in the 60s?
So in the
Who was
19, it
this?
wasn't like it wasn't super famous, but in the 1960s,
Otherwise, we'd know about it.
there were 2 players on the New York Yankees that literally swapped families. Like the guys went to the other household and swapped families completely, right?
So they were the first mommy swaps?
I get, but daddy swaps in this
Oh.
scenario. So
Hey, now.
apparently the reason for it, the original
about this?
explanation, one of the husbands and the other wife were kind of having an affair, essentially.
So they said, "Why not just switch? Your wife's hot, my wife's hot. Let's switch."
They told their significant others, listen, we're going to get divorced anyways. Why don't you guys just go be together, see if it works out for you, and we're going to be together as well. So that's essentially how the swap went. So the reason why I bring all of that up,
Keeps all the dirty laundry out of the air, I guess.
they were talking about this on this podcast that I was listening to. And as I'm running home, I'm right down the block. I'm about a block away from my house. And they're talking about other symbols for swinging.
I can already just see BK like looking around like, am
So
I
I
missing
wasn't.
any of these?
I wasn't. One of the other symbols, I didn't know this, Alex. I'm curious if you were aware of it.
I wasn't.
Is apparently pink flamingos.
What about
If you
them?
see a pink flamingo in front of a house, it could mean this is a swinger's house.
Oh, that's
think I did
wild
know
because I
that
have
one.
friends that have flamingos in front of their
As
house.
they're talking about
Oh,
that,
Jesus. I need to send a couple of texts.
Alex, I am 3 doors down from my house at this point, and I look to my left, no BS. There is a big pink flamingo in front of their yard, and I'm just sitting to myself thinking, like,
Do I say something?
Tell me you went and knocked on their door.
I know these people. They
Yeah,
are
you
next
do.
door to us.
Yeah, you do.
I'm like, man, hey, listen, no kink shame, whatever. If that's how you get by, that's how you get by. I was just unfamiliar with their game. So I'm listening to the podcast.
I am very concerned about my my buddy and his wife's. They have flamingos, and I don't think they're swingers. And if they're not, man,
Should I be alarmed that my grandma once told me her favorite animal was a flamingo?
No, I think
no,
you're good,
animals
man.
are
I think you're
okay.
good. I
It's
had
just
no
when
idea.
you're putting them in front of your house.
Okay, well, I haven't seen that, thankfully.
I had no idea that this also was one of them. I knew about the pineapples. I was familiar with that, but apparently there's other things that also apply.
So I was not familiar with the pineapple one until I think one of you guys brought it up. I have heard of the flamingo one before.
Really?
Yeah.
Somebody texted and said a bluefish is a single male and a unicorn is a single female. Why do we got to have symbols for stuff, man? Remember when Facebook was so easy and it just said single in a relationship? It's complicated.
Apparently it's an upside down pineapple. So
Yeah,
I think
well,
you were good with your
No,
swim trunks.
there was it was, you know, how swim trunks work, where it's like you got some up,
Apparently I'm not.
some down, like, you know, you had a lot of them. So maybe I was sending mixed
Mixed messaging.
messages with
Yeah.
them, you know. Is he a swinger? Is he not a swinger? I'm not.
Allegedly.
No, not allegedly. Man, I'm too tired to have to worry about swinging.
Do you guys know anybody in your life that...
No,
Well, apparently I might. These people that have flamingos in their front of their house.
I've always wondered, like, hey, what's the entry point into that? Do you just, like, go over to your friend's house one day and you're like, you know what? Should we try?
Yeah, how do you start
know,
that
like,
conversation?
what's
Like, do you
I would assume there's apps. There's got to be today. Like,
well, yeah, but like, how do you initiate that conversation?
I would assume, again, nowadays it's the app. But, you know, like 25 years ago.
But still, you still have to like see the people and be like, hey.
There's a commercial, I don't remember who it's for, where it's 2 couples and they're sitting there playing a board game. And I think it's the wife for one of them goes, we should switch. Yeah, I think we're game for that. We could do that. Yeah. I don't remember what she says. I meant teams.
Apparently
maybe you
there's-
just like try and do it that way and then you just play it off if it wasn't. You misread the signals.
Apparently, there's something called Missouri Swingers site.
Sure.
SLS. Thousands of swingers are online now.
That can't be safe.
And then the famous one, which I'm not going to click on, it's Adult Friend Finder. Swingers
telling you,
love hot singles.
I mean, there's a lot of people that do this. It's not like a...
Don't click on it.
I wouldn't click on any of those.
No, I just Googled it.
Apparently, my neighbors do it. I learned that over the weekend. It was good
I hope
information. to
that
know.
your neighbors should come to your house after hearing this segment and go, BK, I just want you to know, we just really like these flamingos in our front
When
yard.
the flamingo's beak is pointing towards your house, that means they've directed your house. They've picked you guys.
That's fine.
So you and Kara are next.
It's fine, man. Hey, whatever they're into. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're getting back into Jake Neighbours, who's already a top 15 power forward in the NHL, according to the numbers. We'll get into that coming up here in just a little bit. But next, we're continuing our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season with number 10 on our list. We're officially into the top 10, and I don't know what it says about the Cardinals that this man is a part of it. We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Ted Drew's, the famous frozen custard off of Chippewa. It is now open for its 95th season. And look, my wife and I have already been out there a few times with our daughters, and that's just what happens. It's warmer out, the sun is out, and even when it's still a little chilly like it is today, it's still a perfect time to get on down to Chippewa and get that Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It's been a St. Louis tradition since 1929, and for generations, Ted Drew's has remained steadfast in their commitment to quality, consistency, and tradition. And what I mean by tradition is you drive down there, you'll see families that have been going there for years, sitting in the back of their minivan, eating Ted Drew's and just talking about life. I love getting to do that with my daughters like I used to do with my parents. And while you're out there, walk across the parking lot and check out the gift shop for Ted Drew's, where you can shop for apparel, both kids and adults. You can buy hats, you can buy drinkware, gift cards, which let me tell you, it's the greatest gift to give somebody when you're never sure what to buy them, a Ted Drew's gift card. So get on out there this spring, this summer season, find out why Ted Drew's famous frozen custard really is good, guys and gals.
the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season.
Number 10, Steven Matz.
Swing and a miss. Suarez down on strikes. Matz is racking them up. He's got 5. Didn't get that, though. Matz strikes him out for the second time. And just like that, there are 2 men out. Swing and a miss. Suarez down on strikes. Matz is racking them up. He's got 5.
All right, at number 10 on our list of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season, it is Steven Matz. He was at number 11 on T-Bone's list. He was at number 7 on Alex's list.
Whoa.
Came in at number 13 on mine. If you're new to this, if you don't understand how this all comes together, we each put together our own individual list of the 20 most important Cardinals. We average it out. That becomes the show's list of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season. And at number 10, we have Steven Matz. Guys, I don't know about you, but I went back and forth on, okay, how do I rank these starters? We haven't gotten to them yet, but as you could probably imagine, Miles Mikolas, Sonny Gray, they're towards the top of the list. What do I do from there? You got Matz, you got Gibson, you got Lynn. How do I rank those 3? And the reason why I personally had them as high as I did and why I had at the top of that list Steven Matz is because I think he has the highest ceiling still to this day. You look back at what he did the year prior to the Cardinals signing him, he had a 3.8 ERA and 150 innings for the Toronto Blue Jays. If the Cardinals could lock it in right now, that they could get that production out of Steven Matz in 2024, that is essentially what the Braves got last year out of Charlie Morton. Charlie Morton last year had 160 innings for the Braves with a 3.7 ERA. So you got 10 more innings out of him and a slightly better ERA than what you previously were able to expect out of Steven Matz. That's fine, dude. If that's your number 3 or 4 starter this season, you can get by with that. You could do a hell of a lot worse than having that guy in that slot. The problem is, man, year 1 was a disaster, and last year he could not stay healthy and lost his job in the rotation. So there's, in the words of John Mozeliak, a wide delta between what the best case scenario is and the worst case scenario is for Steven Matz.
Yeah, I had him high on my list, and I stand by it because if you lose and don't have the Steven Matz that you expected to have when you signed him and the guy that you didn't have for 2 full seasons, you're screwed, at least on the pitching side of things. Because, yeah, you've got Sonny Gray and, yeah, you've got Miles Mikolas, but there is a significant drop-off from those top guys to your bottom guys. And I know Lance Lynn has looked good in spring training, but color me not impressed because it's spring training. I want to see it in the regular season. You're still getting hard hit when you get hit. And when you get to the full games and the full roster, that's going to look different. You lose a Steven Matz, or let's say Matz goes back to the bullpen like he did last year because it just doesn't look good, you're replacing him with Zach Thompson. And although I'm excited about Zach Thompson, he's not automatically a number 3 in my rotation. Now we're talking Lance Lynn being your number 3 and Kyle Gibson being your number 4 and Zach Thompson being your number 5. And I'm sorry, but that's 3 guys that I am going to have to rely heavily on my bullpen and my offense for winning me baseball games. So Steven Matz, if you lose him or you don't have a Steven Matz like he was at the end of the season last year, where his last 5 starts, we're talking about a dude who had an ERA lower than 3. You don't have that guy. Yeah, I'm back on the 80 win train because you don't have pitching.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, and I agree with BK said. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Lyndon Gibson. I think he has the second best stuff on the staff. Now, granted, I don't know what that says about the staff as a whole.
Not
but
good, Bob.
I do like his stuff because he's got swing and miss, and when he has been healthy, he has looked really good for the St. Louis Cardinals. Whatever happened at the beginning of the year last year was just odd. I don't think it was injury related. Just didn't get a feel for. I think it was the changeup that he had all kinds of issues with, but they figured it out. And BK's right. If you can lock in his season before he signed with the Cardinals with the Toronto Blue Jays, absolutely I'd hit that button. I said this, I think, after the World Series. Who's the Cardinal on their pitching staff that could do what Brandon Pfaadt did, which is be like a 3 through 5 kind of starter, but gets to the playoffs and can shove for like 5 starts? I think Steven Matz is that guy, and that's why he's so important for this rotation.
And I think it could be a Zach Thompson if you give him a little bit of runway, but I can't rely on that, especially in the early portion of my season.
So you mentioned, Alex, what he did in his final few starts. His last 7 starts, 38 innings, so averaged a little more than 5 innings per start. 1.8 ERA, opposing hitters bat 190 against him in that stretch. It's awesome. He was dominant. There is important context to that, though. These are the teams in which he started against: the White Sox, the Nationals, the Cubs, the Rockies, the Royals, and he did have one start against the Arizona Diamondbacks, the team that eventually went to the World Series, of course. And he went 6 innings, 6 strikeouts, no earned runs against. So he had a really good start against them. But otherwise, he went up against mostly bad offenses. So that's the context of what he did. Guys, I don't care. If you can get that version of Steven Matz this year, man, you're cooking with gas. And it doesn't even need to be that good. With 1.9 ERA is otherworldly expectations. But if you could get a version of him that's just solid, consistently giving you 5+ innings, and allowing you to have a chance. The innings aren't going to kill you this year with Steven Matz. That's why you go out and sign Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn. It's why you have Miles Michaelis. Matz's job is to give you the quality. And so that is why I had him ranked higher than either of the other two guys, because the upside here, he ends up slotting as your number 3 starter. The downside is, a month into the season, he's no longer in your rotation, and he ends up being in the spot that Matthew Liberatore is currently in with your bullpen.
The problem with Steven Matz is there's no in between. There's no happy medium. Like his first 10 games last season, a 5.72 ERA, and he was 2-8. And went 50 innings for you. So he was giving you about 5 innings, but he was giving up 5 runs a game. There's no happy medium. There's no, oh, well, we've got this guy who's got elite stuff, but he's not good in the first portion of the season, and then he gets hurt in the middle, or we have to push him to the bullpen so he can figure his stuff out. But boy, on those last 10 to 12 starts, you're going to have an elite pitcher. You've got to have a happy medium with somebody like this.
The Cardinals were 2-15 in the first 17 games in which he appeared.
He didn't win his first game until
July 20th.
Yeah, July 20th.
And I'm not even talking about like pitcher wins. I'm talking about the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah.
And this includes 7 appearances out of the bullpen, 10 starts. They were 2-15 in games in which he appeared prior to July 1st. That's the way that you sink a season. They can't have that this year. If he's as bad this year for the first 4 or 5 starts as he was last year, they will have to replace him. And just like last year, your options to replace Steven Matz in the rotation are not ideal. I like Zach Thompson as much as Alex does, maybe even more so. But man, you need Steven Matz to be a part of this rotation to be able to reach the team ceiling. So at number 10 for the Cardinals in terms of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2024 season, it is Steven Matz. Coming up in about 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. You can get involved as well on YouTube. The YouTube chat at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That is where the graveyard is. It is off and running today. Coming up next, man, Jake Neighbours has become a fan favorite. There is no changing that, and the steam for his excitement is not slowing down after what he did this weekend. We got to talk about him and a top 15 power forward already in the NHL, and why. Next, you're on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield. It's that time of the year where you're spending more time outside. You start looking at your house and you see the paint chipping off. You see those water stains on the side of your house and you're thinking, man, does it need a facelift? And that's why you called Darren with Rhino Shield. I called him a few years ago with our house. We had bought the house. My wife wanted a new look to it, and we had Darren come out. He walked us through the whole process. I was a fool and said, you know what? I could probably just do this myself. Darren explained to me, you could do it it yourself, but you're going to be doing it again in 6 months and then 6 months after that. And what Darren explained was the process that Rhino Shield uses. It's a 2 to 3 coating process that maintains the longevity of your stay with the home. And it's backed by a warranty. Darren and his team were there at the start of a weekend and finished the brand new look of my house. And my wife and I love the look of it. If you don't believe me, check out the ton of reviews that they have for Rhino Shield. Here's what Tom D had to say out in Chesterfield. The cruise with Rhino Shield, satisfying customers every single day. When you get these reviews, it's usually tough to please, and I always feel like I could have done more. But when Rhino Shield came out, the change in my house was drastic. So give him a call today, 877-25-RHINO, and tell him that Alex Ferrario sent you, 877-25-RHINO.
On the power play. Moves it to Falk. Quick pump to the front of the net. Buchnevich retrieves it to Shen. Shoot, score! Braden Shen to the front of the net. And again, it's Neighbours screening the goalie. Jake might have had a piece of it to score it. And the St. Louis Blues get the goal from Neighbours. A 3-1 lead on a power play goal.
Jake Neighbours parks his ass in front of the net and scores goals. That's all he does. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex, I was looking at it earlier today because you know me, I'm a nerd, and when I'm looking at some of this stuff, I'm like, okay, let's contextualize what we're seeing from Jake Neighbours. He's so much fun. He's so young. He plays a style that we haven't seen here in St. Louis since David Backes walked away, really, and he's doing it at the age of 21. That's incredibly rare. So I went over to the nerdy number site that the NHL put together over the course of the last year or so. It's called the NHL's Edge. And what they do is they track where every goal is scored from. They've got a tracker in the puck, and every goal that's scored, they know exactly where it came from. So for Jake Neighbours, as an example, he has scored 17 of his goals from the high danger area, which means either in the blue paint or directly in front of the blue paint, right? When you look at the best players in the league, who are the guys that are doing this most often, scoring in those high danger areas? It's the names you'd probably expect. Zach Hyman is the best in the league at this, 38 high danger goals on the season. Then you continue there, it's a bunch of household names. Sam Reinhart, Austin Matthews, Chris Kreider, my guy, Braden Point, Philip Forsberg, Nishushkin, Coyle, Eriksson Ek, Coleman. All those guys are in the top 10. Those last four names that I just read all have 20 goals on the season from the high danger areas. As I mentioned, Jake Neighbours has 17. Alex, we're talking about a guy that might legitimately be a top 15 power forward in the league right now in terms of the way that he is producing. And he's doing this at the age of 21 in his first full season in the NHL. What are you seeing from Jake Neighbours right now?
You are seeing a unicorn right now. And I've said this a couple of times, and you just don't see these guys in the NHL anymore. You don't see guys who are willing to stand in front of the net, take a beating, but also reap the rewards. And that's what Jake Neighbours has done. And I think in terms of current day, Zach Hyman is the perfect example. Like, I really love the Tomas Holmstrom one that I mentioned earlier that Joey said last night on postgame, because Holmstrom was never a big guy, but he was always tough to handle, and he mastered the art of those deflections, and that's really an art that comes with it. Like, it's not just standing there, it's being able to get the correct tips in the direction that you need the puck to go to beat the goaltender the right way. But you've got a guy who doesn't care what happens to him. He goes and stands in front of the net, and even if he doesn't come up on the stat sheet, he's taking the eyes of the goalie away. Steve Ott had said this last night on postgame with Curbs and Joey when they asked him, and he said, I'll tell you one guy. This was unasked. Like, they were talking about the win, and Steve Ott said, I'll tell you one guy that was massive for our power play. It was Jake Neighbours. Yep. The one thing he does is he goes to hard areas. That's not an easy thing to do, but he's impacting our entire team. And if you look at the power play goals, since Drew Bannister took over in the National Hockey League, Jake Neighbours is tied for 11th. He's got the same amount of power play goals as Elias Pettersson, Tage Thompson, Kirill Kaprizov, Brock Besser, Ryan O'Reilly, TJ Oshie, Alex Ovechkin. The only guys he trails in power play goals: Zach Hyman, who's got one more than him, Draisaitl, Pasternak, Matthews, McKinnon, Nichushkin, Rantanen, and Stamkos. So this is why I've been screaming from the mountaintops, please put Jake Neighbours on the top line, because you're seeing this now, 21 goals in his second full season. I think you could see a Zach Hyman bump by putting him on the top line playing with a Robert Thomas, because you've got a playmaker, you'll put some type of shooter with him, and you have the net front presence just like Edmonton's doing with Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, and Hyman.
So I've been thinking about this a lot, Alex. And as I look at the standings right now in the Western Conference, just the NHL in general.
Yeah.
The Blues are 4 points back of Vegas and LA for the final wildcard spot. Vegas is all in. They could not be more all in on this year, next year, like this winning window. They have pushed all of their chips into the middle for it. LA thought this was their year to start their winning window, and that's why they went out and got Pierre-Luc Dubois prior to the season. It's why they fired their coach midway through the year, because they were like, okay, we've got to get this figured out. We were great to start out the season. We've gone into this lull. What are we doing? Let's fire the coach. It's got to be the thing that ends up getting us back on track. It really hasn't, and so they're still kind of middling. Other teams that are kind of in the same area for you, though, are like, man, Detroit is right in the same area as you. They have gone through the rebuild. They're supposed to be winning right now.
They've selected top 10, I believe, 3 of the last 5 years or 4 of the last 5 years.
And they've spent. Like, now they've gone into free agency. They've spent on players that were supposed to push this rebuild in the direction of, we are ready to win now. We've seen a team like the New Jersey Devils that tanked.
They've drafted in the top 10 7 straight years.
The Devils tanked, man.
Yeah.
They
5
got
of the last 6
top picks.
Mm-hmm.
They have the players that they built around. They traded for Timo Meier a year ago. Like, they're in it. They're trying to win now. They're picking in the top 10 again based on where they're at right now. And the reason why I bring that up as context for the Blues is because, man, for how frustrating this year has been, and it's been incredibly frustrating at times, we've still got something like a Jake Neighbours, which he's top 6 forward. We'll figure out where he goes. He's a top 6 forward for you for the long term. I don't know where Jordan Kyrou fits long term, but he's a top 6 forward for a winning team. Pavel Buchnevich, top 6 forward for a winning team. Robert Thomas is a top line forward for every team in the NHL right now. You look at your blue line like, okay, Parayko's fit in. Leddy's a top 4 forward, or top 4 defenseman. You have unbelievable goaltending, number 1 and number 2. For all the frustrations about this year, the Blues are not as far away from putting together a contending team, I think, as I probably gave it credit for. You're missing some pieces, but if you could trade Justin Falk, for example, this offseason, man, you repurpose that money towards your middle 6 forward group, like, you could be right back into contention next year, man. Yeah. You're not that far away right now.
And this is why I do believe it's important to get a playoff spot, or at least chase it, because if you lose, you look back on this season and you miss it by 2 points and you say, you know what? if we don't have that hiccup in the middle of the season where we lost 3 out of 10 and played the way that we played down the stretch, we're talking about a different outcome. You've got pieces in place. We've talked about this. You've got the number 1 centerman. You've got some depth pieces now that are showing themselves up. Brandon Saad is just a regular 25-goal scorer a season, and we don't talk enough about him.
He's frustrating.
Very frustrating
because he floats in and out of games.
But that's middle of the lineup guys.
You paid for him to be what he has been.
Yeah.
He has lived up to every penny of his contract. I know that sounds crazy, but if you put him on a contending team right now, the fan base would be like if he was a third-line winger just doing what he's done for the Blues. Their fans would be like, yeah, he was worth exactly
Colorado
what we paid
loved him the year that before he came to St. Louis because he was doing this. You've got some lower-level guys like fourth-liners that make him – like Nathan Walker and Alexei Toropchenko have played inspired hockey over these last couple of weeks that puts this team in the position. Your defense has gotten a lot more settled, which, again, is why I was so angry that they sent Matt Kessel down for 8 games. But they are settled now that you have lefty-righty pairings that work for those guys, and you have unbelievable goaltending. Those teams that you just talked about, New Jersey, Detroit, Pittsburgh, all of these teams that are out that should have been in, it's because their goaltending has been terrible. And you've got 2 guys who could be in the Jennings Trophy conversation for how good they've played. So, and you're also forgetting we were clamoring for offense. Now you're getting it. But you're also potentially going to have Jimmy Snuggerud by the end of this season to bring more scoring. Dvorsky, who is putting up 80-something points in 49 games in juniors hockey right now. You've got the pieces. Right now, it feels like you're on the other side of it, that you're hoping you can exit out. Now, you need to finish off the season the right way. You can't lay an egg. Otherwise, you start going back the other direction. This feels like you're coming out on the other end, and it just needs some fine-tuning to your roster, which Doug Armstrong has shown very much success with fine-tuning rosters.
So we got this from the 314. I feel like again, if we could just T-Bone have a disclaimer at the bottom that just says our, strong opinion on this Blues team. Hey, I don't think they're all that good, but they might make the playoffs. They've got really good goaltending. The power play's been really good. The special teams are solid. If we could just have that running on the bottom and talk about, hey, we're talking big picture right now. Blues, yeah. That would be great.
T-Bone,
from the 314. So you guys are flip-flopping again on the Blues, huh? Do you realize how stupid you sound when you flip-flop your stance on them every week? I think my stance has been incredibly consistent on this Blues team, man.
Find somebody who has had a consistent stance on this Blues team this season.
Right here. Oh, hey, over here. Look over here.
Put your head down.
Everybody has been saying this team is bad, and if they figure out how to improve their play and stay consistent, they could be a playoff team.
My point on this, though, is what I'm talking about is big picture stuff. I'm talking about what it looks like for the Blues in the long term. My stance on this team is that I don't think they're very good, but they have good enough goaltending and some of these other things, special teams-wise, that because the West is down, I think they could find a way to sneak into the playoffs. That doesn't mean they're a great team, guys. They're terrible at 5-on-5. Objectively, there is no good number that you can find at 5-on-5. But where I have flip-flopped, and I will totally say this, is by looking at what the future is. Because Matt Kessel is not somebody, maybe you guys all saw this coming from him. I personally did not. Matt Kessel is not somebody I saw coming. And whether he's a top 4 defenseman or a bottom pair defenseman, he's somebody that you can have in that group moving forward for $800,000. That matters. I didn't see personally, maybe you guys did, that Jake Neighbours was going to be a 25 to 30 goal scorer this year.
Right here.
Put your hand down.
No, I knew it.
And if you did, more power to you, man. I personally didn't project this season, and many actually did see this. I was a doubter. I was a hater, and he's proven me wrong. I didn't see a potential 90 to 100-point season for Robert Thomas coming this year, and he has done that. So when you get all of things that come together in a meaningful way, yeah, it changes my opinion on how I view the future of the team. And then when you also see what's happened in the West, where these teams just aren't as good as we expected them to be, man, there's an opening for right now and for in the future for the Blues to be able to potentially walk through. So if they're able to get rid of a little bit of the money on their books from the blue line and you continue to build around what you have in place right now, you could find a way. You could find a way to start competing at a meaningful level as soon as next year. And if this team makes the playoffs this year, hot damn, man. Starting to really talk about something that might be more interesting than we expected it to be.
Another one that popped in, it says what they're talking about, because they're trying to clarify, is that one week we think they're a playoff team and then the next week we think they're not a playoff team. And that is because of their inconsistent play. That's why I said last night on pregame with Joe, That Anaheim Ducks game to me was more important for the Blues than Minnesota or the LA Kings, because I've seen them compete against some of the top teams, and they play well. And it's when they play against the bad teams that we say, yeah, but you know what? The effort wasn't there. Well, the effort was there. And you know why? And I have remained on this page all season long. There has been no flip-flopping. The Blues have a goaltender that you can get into the playoffs with, and if you get to the playoffs, you can win a playoff round.
That's the thing. This team is fragile.
Very
and I'm not
much
talking
so.
about mentally this year. Last year, they were fragile mentally. This year, they're fragile in the way that they win. It's really hard to win consistently with power play, penalty kill, and goalie play. And that's what they're trying to do. And it still continues to be what they're doing right now. Even during this 4-game winning streak, it's basically just, hey, let's win on the power play, bide our time at 5-on-5, and hopefully Jordan Bennington and Joel Hofer stand on their heads for 40 minutes out of the night. And they have been able to. And so my flip-floppiness on this is how sustainable is that? And the other thing that's changed right now, what's really changed for me, Alex, is not about the Blues at all. It's about what the rest of the teams are doing in this race. I thought they would pull away in a meaningful way, and they haven't yet. And if that continues to be the case, then I'm going to continue riding on this wave, man. The other thing is, like, I'm okay riding the wave with the Blues this year.
That's what being a fan is.
That's what it's supposed to be.
If you want to be miserable from games 1 to 82 and say, this team sucks and they're going to be bad until they trade this player, then by all means, you get to be a fan just like we get to be fans. But I'm going to ride the roller coaster when a team...
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun, man. It's fun to be over here just washing away at sea where you're like, hey, I don't know where we're going, but let's go together, boys.
If these texters have been Blues fans, and I'm just assuming that you are because you listen to St. Louis Sports Radio.
That's why they're listening.
But if you're Blues fans and have been Blues fans, you went through 30 years of just miserable goaltending in this city. And, like, I'm not shooting down. Like, we've had Chris Mason and Brian Elliott and Jake Allen. But you never had a goaltender that you were like, that guy could win us a Stanley Cup since Grant Fuhr. And now, because the inconsistent play in front of them, the goalie's stealing your hockey games. That's how you're in this spot. Good. They haven't had a goaltender to steal you hockey games in 30 freaking years.
You know who would love to be in this position right now is Detroit or New Jersey.
Well, they thought they did with Ville Husso. Am I right, T-Bone?
Coming up next, in or out here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends at Classic Air Care when it comes to your HVAC system. Well, you got to use the right company that you trust with this one. And I talk a lot about trust with Classic Air Care because I'm entrusting them with my 27-year-old HVAC system that when we flip it on, which, we've gone back and forth a little bit to where it was like, do we turn it on? Do we turn it off? Look, you got to make sure it's somebody that takes care of your unit. And that's why I use Classic Air Care. I'm a part of their maintenance program where they come out every 6 months to before I turn the heat on, before I turn the air on, and they check it, they fine-tune it, they tell me that it's old, and they tell me that if I take care of it, it'll be in good shape. But here's the thing. I've talked with them about when the HVAC system goes out. They've walked me through what we would need when we purchase a new HVAC system, and that's the upfront honesty that you desire with an HVAC company. And look, you can check out the hundreds of reviews that are up on their 4.8 Google rating. This one from Brian, it says, thank you so much for the excellent service. My unit went out in the middle of summer. I called them that night. They had a technician out there fixing my unit and walking me through the whole process. It's the best service that I've ever had. So be one of the hundreds of customers that use Classic Air Care that love and talk about how great the work is. Classic Air Care, classicaircare.com.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues beat the Ducks last night 4-2. They'll be back in action tomorrow night as they take on the Colorado Avalanche. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. The Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You give us a scenario, we will tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, let's start with this. In or out, Justin Fields will be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers by week 6 of the NFL season.
Oh, in. I think he's the starter after week 1 for week 1. I think you make that trade secondary because you don't want Justin Fields coming in feeling entitlement of like, oh, he's our number one guy. I think you make that trade late because you're a part of a group that is trying to be the number one quarterback. And I know you've got Russell Wilson, but let's be honest. We know who's more talented. It's Justin Fields. So I do believe you'll start the season with Justin Fields as your number one quarterback. And if it falls for Fields, then you go to Russell Wilson.
What week did you say? Week what?
Week 6.
Week 6. Yeah, I'll say I'm in on that. I think it's probably, this is going to be the classic, like, oh, it's not a quarterback competition. And then Russell Wilson goes out there, lays an egg, and then in like 3 weeks, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's actually Justin Fields' job. I actually don't think they did this as like we don't want Fields being titled. I think they're poorly ran as an organization. That's what I think, because why would you waste $1.6 million on Russell Wilson if you're going to go trade for Justin Fields?
Isn't that typically what you pay for a backup quarterback,
yes,
though?
But I think when it's Russ with a big name and the whole let Russ cook movement, like, I don't think it's that scenario.
I don't think they were planning to trade for Justin Fields.
I don't think
the
they were
Kenny
planning on
Pickett
trading
stuff
Pickett.
happened because of Justin Fields.
Yeah, exactly.
Or excuse me, because of Russell Wilson. When they traded for Russell Wilson, they told him, you're the starter. Kenny Pickett got all up in his feelings about it. I guess I get it to a degree. Apparently, he was kind of a whiner and a complainer last year.
Yeah, because they benched him as the third guy.
So he didn't want to.
I'm better than Kyle Rudolph.
He didn't want to suit up as the emergency third quarterback. So they're like, enough of you. Go to Philadelphia. We got to get a backup quarterback. The guy that's out there that's available that makes sense for us, and we have to give up a 6th-round pick. Yeah, we'll go ahead and take Justin Fields off your hands, Chicago. So I don't think this was in their plans. I do think that he's going to be their starter, though, by week 6, because I think we know what Russell Wilson is at this point, man. He's not very good. I do think he's going to be a problem for that offense, and I think sooner rather than later, you're going to have Arthur Smith looking over his shoulder and saying, okay, so I've got this athletic freak, 6'5", 240 pounds, and Justin Fields, who can make stuff happen on his own. Meanwhile, my wide receiver room has been decimated because we just traded away Deontay Johnson for no reason whatsoever. I've got George Pickens, who's a really good downfield threat. Fields has a cannon of an arm. Let's see if that works. That's our best chance right now to be able to do something meaningful. So I'm in. I think he ends up being their starter. Alex?
Guys, in or out, the one change that Doug Armstrong must make in the offseason is fixing and bringing in a top defenseman.
No, I'm out. I think that he needs a top 6 forward. If you told me right now, the Blues are able to wash their hands of one of their contracts on the blue line worth $6 million, let's say, but not named Colton Parayko, I think the number one priority would be to reallocate that money to your middle 6. So that would be my number one.
Yeah,
priority.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, T-Bone. I'll get mine after you.
I'll say I would say I'm out. I'm kind of with BK, but I will say this, and I think I've been consistent with this as the text line likes.
Over here.
I don't think you exit the retool till you find Parayko's partner. I truly believe that. And like Letty's like the perfect like stopgap guy.
Yeah.
I hate to say that he's kind of like your Ryan Fitzpatrick of quarterbacks. But I would totally agree with BK. I think your main focus this offseason is improving and bolstering that middle 6. It's probably 2 off seasons, 3 off seasons away before finding that Parayko partner.
I'm actually going to say in on this one. I do think that the goal should be to find a defenseman to play with Parayko. The hard part is there's a lot more of those middle 6 forwards this offseason than there are defensemen.
Are there a middle 6 center? Because I'd like one of those here on Iowa Blues.
I like Shen at the center position. I think he's better at the center position, and Hayes has done well there.
I feel like there's so many injuries that have started to pile up with Shin, though. I can't expect him to be able to make it through an 82-game season.
I would, if you were telling me you either get a middle six centerman or a middle six goal scorer, I would go the goal scorer route because I just think I need more weapons for those two centermen. So I'm not using Kapanen in my top 9. I'm not using
Kapanen's gone.
Yeah, Kapanen's gone in this spot. You know, like you can move guys around. And why I go the defenseman route is because I think Jimmy Snuggerud is one of those middle six forwards. And unless you're making a hockey trade of trading one guy out and bringing another middle six forward in or a top winger, the one area that you have nothing coming next season is at defense. Unless Theo Lindstein is just, surprise, surprise, Alex Pietrangelo, like everybody projected him to be at the draft. But I would actually say in on this one. I would go defenseman.
Guys... Oh, go ahead.
I think your top 9 next year is Saad, Thomas, Kyrou, not necessarily in this order, but just...
Damn, you put Saad on the top line, man.
Shin, Thomas, Kyrou, Saad, blank, Neighbours, Bolduc, Hayes, Snuggerud, and somebody in that question mark area is either Booch or another center.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where it's at. And I just go the route of I'd put Shen in the center, and the question mark is Booch or another winger.
Guys, in or out, we will not see Bill Belichick as a coach in the NFL again.
Ooh. I'm going to say out.
So I've been watching that Dynasty show as well.
Have you finished it?
No, I need to watch it.
Such a...
Dude, by the way, Belichick, dude, you got screwed in this documentary. The only reason he did this, I'm pretty sure, is because at the time he was under contract as the Patriots coach, and this is a Robert Kraft kind of oversaw the editing of it. He comes off bad in this documentary.
It's terrible.
I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it, but like... aren't there a lot of hard-ass coaches behind the scenes that we just don't know about?
Man,
I feel like...
who are the really good ones right now in the NFL?
I mean, I would say Dan Campbell's one of them, and he seems like a hard-ass, though.
No, it's different, man. It's different.
We just don't see behind closed doors, though.
Man, I saw Hard Knocks, and he's not this way at all.
Like I said, I haven't watched this yet. It's like on my queue list to watch, so I need to watch it.
He's an a-hole. Like, he's
vicious
up in you at all times, and it's relentless, dude. And so, like, are there guys that are tough? Like, Andy Reid's a really tough coach, man. He runs one of the most difficult training camps in the NFL. Kyle Shanahan, that dude is tough. He is a miserable human being. However, like, he's a really good coach. Shanahan's probably the closest thing that we have right now to what Bill Belichick was. He's tough. Other than that, though, man, the good ones are not that way, really. It's much more like player empowerment. There's guys that are on you. Don't get me wrong. Like, you have to be. Teacher, coach, whatever. If you're somebody that needs to have an authoritative presence, you got to have a little bit of that in you. But, like, look at D'Amico Ryans. That guy's not out there acting the way that Bill Belichick was, right? I don't know that, like, Bill Parcells, if he were to come up today through the ranks of being an NFL head coach, I don't think he operates the way that he did in the 80s and in the 90s. I think he's a different guy. So I think things are just trending in a different direction. So as much as I said I couldn't believe that the league's kind of cast him off to the side, I think I'm in on this. I think you're right, T-Bone. I don't think he gets another job.
Yeah, I'm in on this as well. Watching that documentary, I don't know how you could hire him. It would be such I think the most recent guy that I could think of that you could probably bring him in and it probably has like a 2 to 3 year window of working would be Bruce Arians. Because Bruce Arians was a little bit of this hard-ass guy that was going to come in and really push guys. I'll never forget him in that series that Amazon did originally, All or Nothing, I think it was, where they followed a team for like half a season. And like in the preseason, it's like, when I'm calling you a mother effer, that doesn't mean I hate you, it just is football. Yeah.
That's not what that word means.
I know, but I think that if you get higher Belichick, you've got like 2-3 years. I mean, he ran the greatest player of all time out of the building in New England. That's what the documentary tells you. Yeah. He ran him out of the building. And if that's the case, and he's calling out Tom Brady in team meetings, how is it if he goes to like Atlanta, for example? How's Kirk Cousins going to handle that? You know, like I just cannot see it. I'm in on this. I don't think we see Bill Belichick the head coach anymore.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. For somebody from the 636 said, guys, what channel has this documentary? It's on Apple TV. I think it's actually a really good watch.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's like the best produced documentary in the world. It's an in-house documentary, guys. This is made by the Kraft family. So remember always, what is the perspective that I'm getting? And it tries really hard to make Robert Kraft look like the savior and the guy that made everything work in the Patriots organization. I think the guy that comes off the best, though, is Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady comes off amazing in this documentary, man. He's He's a guy that I would want to play for. And I think at one point, one of the guys says, I can't remember who it was. Might have been like Edelman. Amendola. We played for Tom Brady. We were employed by Bill Belichick, something along those lines. I thought that was an interesting line from him. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. Guys, in or out, the Battlehawks will be the measuring stick of the UFL this year.
Sure.
Somebody said there's a flamingo team in the XFL this year, and if that's the case, well, we know they're going to be losers. Am I right?
There was a power rankings that just came out for the UFL, and they were listed at number 1.
Yeah.
The Flamingos?
Battlehawks, actually.
Yeah, they will be.
Battlehawks were at 1. The Stallions were listed at
they probably got the best quarterback in the league, so sure, I'm in. That's what you need.
They do have the best quarterback in the league.
You've got Hakeem Butler again, Derek Shepard back. Like, you've got some real talent on this team. So, yeah, I'll say in on this one as well. Guys, in or out, the number 1 seed in the NCAA men's tournament, the number 1 seeds, all of them, will lose before the Sweet 16.
All of them?
Mm-hmm. So they'll lose at some point on the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
I'm going to say out. Yeah. I think the one that I would say I just don't see happening is UConn.
They'd have to lose against FAU or Northwestern. Good teams.
Yeah, but I still think UConn's better than both of those.
Yeah,
I could see Purdue falling. I could see UNC falling. Yeah, Purdue seems like one
Purdue's
of those.
Good this year.
Yeah,
this is the first year where I've been like, yeah, okay, I get it.
I've got Purdue winning it all. I think they are the best team, and I'm not saying that because I watched them kick the crap out of the Illini twice, but they've got a big that can play, and they've got guards that can play as well, and that is key for them. So I would say I'm out on this.
In or out, guys. Roman Berkey will win goaltender of the year this year.
It's going to be pretty tough for him to outdo what he did last year. So if he didn't get it last year,
dude, he was unbelievable this weekend.
Yeah,
that was a really fun game, by the way.
Yeah, especially the final 5 minutes of that game. Holy crap! I would say I'm in on this. He'll win. He'll win goalie.
I think it's easy for him. I think you start the season as the best goaltender in MLS.
I can't believe I'm saying this because I feel like, I don't know this for sure because I don't know a lot of MLS guys outside of the city guys. I feel like he's probably he still is the face of the franchise. Even though Klaus was so good, Leuven was really good and was in consideration for MVP, Roman Berkey is the face of the franchise and honestly one of the faces of MLS because look at the MLS commercial they have. They've got him in it with Lionel Messi promoting the product.
I like this team. I think I'm kind of bought in on this team. I don't know that they're great, but they had their B squad out there for much of the game on Saturday, and it looks good against a really solid Galaxy team. So
when's the roller coaster going to dip, BK?
The rewind is next.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend Tracy Bibb, her and her team at Allstate, always taking care of you when it comes to your insurance coverage, whether it's for your car, whether it's for your home. I love what they preach. They preach it's not a matter of if something happens, it's when something happens. And when it does, you need the right insurance agent who's there to help you. And you've been in this scenario before. I've been in this scenario before where you're on the side of the road after a fender bender or your basement floods and you call your insurance and they don't answer. And then you're thinking, now what do I do? You don't have that with Tracy Bibb. It's when you call, she answers, and she's there to help you. And you can give her a call today and ask for a free non-committal quote. She'll walk you through everything that you need to do to switch your insurance. She'll talk to you about the rates. She'll talk to you about how she's going to save you money, and she'll even cancel your previous insurance agency. 314-328-4260. Again, call that number. Tell Tracy Alex Ferrario sent you, and you'll get a free non-committal quote. 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Hey, the NCAA men's basketball tournament is here, and you can come watch the games this Thursday and Friday with 101 ESPN and Bud Light. On Thursday, you can join us live from Cyberg's in O'Fallon. The 101 ESPN will be there from 11 a.m. until 6 o'clock. It'll be us and then the Fast Lane, of course. And on Friday, we'll both be broadcasting live from Helen Fitzgerald on Lindbergh. Come by, enjoy some food, a cold Bud Light, 101 ESPN giveaways, so much more. Details are available right now at 101ESPN.com. Hey, we had a great show today, I thought, boys. It was good to have both of you back in studio with us today. Alex Ferrario, Tanner Hendrickson both did great. It was good to be able to catch up with Katie Wu earlier today. We also had the one, the only David Backus, who had a fantastic conversation with us about being a power forward in today's NHL and what it takes to build culture and how quickly it can go away for you. He compared it to planting a tree, which was much better than what Nick Sirianni compared culture to. So all of that, so much more available for you on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It is all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
We will be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next. Alex is going to stick around for a little while. Woo! Kerry's going to try to power through this thing. He's got half of a voice going on right now.
Sorry,
at
Kerry.
some point, they're going to be able to fix the cameras for you on these things as well.
What you do,
All of that
T-Bone?
coming up here on 101 ESPN.